Okay, sure.
We're recording.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. This is Johanna Schneider. I will be sitting as chair of the proceedings this evening. Before we begin, I will confirm that all members and other persons anticipated to participate on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jesse Geller.
Present.
Wadner OJ.
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Nicole Perret.
Here.
Polly Selko.
Here.
Paul Campbell.
Here.
Jonathan Simpson.
I'm here.
Thank you. All speakers should make best efforts to identify themselves by name prior to speaking. This hearing of the ZBA in open session is being conducted remotely and in a manner that is consistent with the legislature's extension of the provision initially made under Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 executive order concerning the now expired state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. This body is authorized to meet entirely remotely so long as adequate public access is provided. Adequate public access does not include public participation unless such participation is required by law. This hearing will feature public comment. For this hearing, the ZBA is convening by video conference via Zoom as posted on the town's calendar, which identifies how the public may access the hearing. Please be advised that this hearing is and that some attendees may be participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are also available to the public and may be accessed through the town website or by request from planning staff. Finally, before turning to the agenda, I will cover some ground rules that will permit clear and effective conduct of our business and help to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will invite each member by name to provide any comment, question, or motion. Please hold yours until your name is called. Please also remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking and to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. Before responding, please wait until the floor is yielded to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in sidebar comment with other members, please do so through me. Finally, each vote taken in this hearing will be conducted by roll call vote. For the public comment component of this hearing, I will first ask members of the public, if there are any, who wish to speak to identify themselves by name and address. I will call on each by name. Please enter your name into the chat section. You'll find the chat icon on the bottom of your screen. Click on this icon and the chat window will appear on the right. Our host, Nicole Perret, will queue members in the order in which the request is received. Additionally, we will ask if members of the public who are calling in would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to the project. With that, we are going to turn to our agenda items this evening. I believe that a request for an extension of a comprehensive permit for 1299 Beacon Street is first on our agenda.
Yes, and we have Rachna Balkrishna here to present.
Okay, Ms. Balakrishna.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was not in a good place for a connection. I'm so sorry. Hang on. I had sent a letter to the planning department requesting an extension of 3 years for comprehensive permit for 1299 Beacon, which we finalized and recorded in February 2022 due to the high interest rates at the moment and the cost of financing. We are requesting a 3-year extension.
Thank you. Nicole, was this a noticed public hearing?
No.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't need to ask for a waiver of the reading of the notice. So we have before us a 3-year extension request under 760 CMR 5605 12C. We do have the authority to extend a previously granted comprehensive permit, and we are not permitted to unreasonably deny a request for an extension. With those ground rules, Jesse Geller, do you have any questions for the applicant requesting the extension?
I don't have any questions for the applicant. I just want to be clear. It's a 3-year extension from the date of the comprehensive permit.
I believe they're asking for, and Ms. Balakrishna, if you can hear us and you can clarify in response to Jesse's question, are you looking for, I'm assuming that you are looking for a 3-year extension from the date on which the permit was recorded?
So the permit was recorded on February 16th, 2022. And we had been told we had 3 years from that date to start construction. We are now almost 3 years from that date. So we're looking for a 3-year extension from the expiration of the current time period. So that would be the current time period ends February 16th of this year. And so we would like a 3-year extension from that date. We fully expect to be starting construction before then, but we just want to make sure that we have enough time.
So the requested extension is until February 16th, 2028?
Correct.
Okay, Jesse, does that answer your question?
It does.
Wadner, do you have any questions from for the applicant relating to this extension request?
I do not have any questions.
Okay. Can we have a motion to grant the extension, as we are probably required to do under the 40B regulations?
I make a motion to extend it for 3 years, started from February 16, 2025 until February 16, 2028.
Okay,
I
Jesse.
second. I second,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, it is a unanimous grant of the requested extension of the comprehensive permit until February 16th, 2028. Moving on to.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachna. Moving on to the next matter on our agenda, it is 90 Bellingham Road. Is the applicant's representative here?
I am, Madam Chair.
Mr. Allen, do you waive the reading of the published notice of this matter?
Absolutely, and it's 90 and 100 Bellingham.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Allen, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you are asking this board for this evening?
Okay. We have a presentation which will take a few minutes. I'm Jeffrey Allen from the law firm of Lawson Whiteson. I live in Brookline, Massachusetts, and I'm here representing the Chabad of Chestnut Hill. And in their application to build a new Chabad of Chestnut Hill at 90-100 Bellingham Road. They currently have a smaller Chabad on the other end of Bellingham Road. And I'd say to you tonight, the town of ours, through your board, has a tremendous opportunity to stand solidly behind an emerging and growing Brookline religious organization. The case before you exemplifies why the Dover Amendment was enacted and why it has stood the test of time. The proposal you hear tonight is more than reasonable and is more compliant with our zoning code than most Dover cases. While I appreciate the concerns of the neighborhood, when truly studied, their concerns are really not about the dimensional restrictions, but rather about the use. And there can be no argument that the use is a protected use under Dover. I urge you as we go through this evening to look at and pay close attention to the facts as we present them, because as the neighborhood is mobilized, some of the facts have become incredibly blurred and misrepresented. And I call your attention, even this morning, you got an email from Precinct 15 town meeting members. In it said that the Chabad in Newton is 1/3 the size of our Chabad's proposal. That is entirely false. We're requesting a Chabad of 23,000 square feet, and as I presented to the board, the Chabad in Newton, as their rabbi has written, is 18,660 square feet. Now, I understand everybody's well-intentioned, but I think as we move forward, we need to look at the actual facts of our proposal, not what has transpired in neighborhood conversation. Tonight's proposals has gone through have all abutters to our proposal will have greater setbacks than if a single-family home was to be built. All abutters have far less height on a structure near their house than if a single-family home was built. This proposal complies with open space, with significantly more open space than a single-family home. The only real zoning relief is FAR, which is driven only by the religious use, and any reduction in our FAR would minimize the religious program. Our proposal is smaller in size in FAR than most religious uses in Brookline. It is for this reason that a unanimous planning board has endorsed and supports this proposal. Tonight is another step in this long journey of the Chabad at Chestnut Hill's need for a new home. As we move forward tonight, I'll point out the many areas where the positions of the attorney for the abutters is without factual support. To start out, I must say this process has certainly been robust. This is our 7th meeting with the neighborhood, and in addition, we've had additional one-on-one communications. For approximately 20 years, a single-family home on Bellingham Road has been the home of the Chabad, which they have clearly outgrown. Their search for a new home has been difficult, since many in the congregation follow the Orthodox or conservative tradition of walking to the Chabad on days of worship, thus the need for the Chabad to stay in the neighborhood. Fortunately, the Chabad was able to purchase the single-family homes at 90 and 100 Bellingham Road, which will ultimately be the location of the Chabad at Chestnut Hill. We have hired a very talented architect, Adolfo Perez, who we in the planning board feel created an exceptional design that blends into the neighborhood and will serve our programming needs. The programs at the new building, the new building will only house religious programs. The programs that this new building needs to accommodate include a sanctuary for worship, a social hall for religious celebrations, classrooms for a Jewish preschool, classrooms for a traditional Sunday school, and a learning space for adult education. The building will also house the Chabad's administrative staff. Included in the administrative staff are individual that handles all facets of the on-site religious, social, educational, and fundraising activities. The administrative staff also handles the Chabad's activities in the community, including the operation of a religious day camp, which is at another location, but which the administration will be in this building. That camp generates a lot of administrative duties and hiring because they average about 120 children a week. The sanctuary will have a capacity of 120 seats, but given that on significant holidays, the congregation exceeds that amount, the sanctuary was designed to be built with the social hall adjacent thereto, so that the synagogue can be expanded by using the social hall as flex space, so it will increase the worship space to meet high demand on major holidays. Just recently, last year on the high holidays, the Chabad had about 200 worshipers in rented space. Getting here tonight has been preceded by many significant developments. On June 6th last year, the Chabad hosted a neighborhood meeting to display our proposed plan. An interesting point to note is that meeting was held in our outdoor tent, which we use for worship services. And many of the participants in the neighborhood meeting felt that that site was inappropriate because they couldn't hear over the noise of the cars. I think that underscored our need for a new home. After the neighborhood meeting, we filed for demolition permits. After the Preservation Commission, over our objections based on RLUIPA statute, enacted a one-year demolition delay, we filed a complaint for relief in the land court, to which the town agreed to a judgment in our favor, and the court then ordered the building commissioner to issue a demolition permit. As we sit here today, demolition is imminent. Following that action, the matter went before the planning board on 3 different occasions. The applicant was considered by the planning board, and he appears here tonight under the protection of the Dover Amendment. Despite the protections of the Dover Amendment, we have voluntarily agreed to certain conditions for approval at the request of planning board staff and planning board members. We have worked with the planning board and the staff to modify our plans to address the legitimate concerns that have been expressed, and are grateful that we are here before you tonight, as I mentioned, with the unanimous support of the planning board. We understand that under Dover, Chabad does not have to comply with strict application of zoning mandates, but rather reasonable application of height, density, and setback requirements can be imposed.
Chabad attendees are not required to walk the temple. I don't know, I can't get it.
That's not me.
I could ask that folks who are here for a public comment keep themselves on mute until the public comment section and they're called upon. That would help the proceedings go more quickly. Sorry, Mr. Allen.
No problem. We believe that the current proposal is very reasonable in all of these areas. It is important to note that Dover would allow reasonable application of a zoning provision regarding parking, but that is not relevant to this matter, since our bylaw in section 6.023C exempts any religious use in the town from any parking requirement. Thus, in this matter, we really need to deal with density, height, setback, and open space. Courts have generally held that what is a reasonable application of zoning under Dover is generally a case-by-case determination. In preparing for this tonight, I happened to notice a previous ZBA case from 2019, which was an educational use. I believe it was Efferall LLC was the educational entity. What was of interest to me in that case was that John Bookheit from the town council's office explained to the zoning board of appeals that reasonableness is basically if literal enforcement of the zoning bylaw would substantially diminish or detract from usefulness of the proposed protective use, that would be unreasonable. I submit that not only are we entitled to the requested relief under the provisions of Dover, but also under our own special permit provisions. Now, let me talk about height for a minute. And as we know, the 4 areas are height, setback, density, and open space. And if you look at many of the neighbors' comments, and even though in some of their councils, it deviates from those areas into things like groundwater and other things, which aren't zoning concerns, but certainly concerns for other town departments. In the proposed design, approximately almost all of the building is compliant with what is mandated by the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw allows 35 feet of height. The Chabad is a 2-story building that only slightly exceeds 35 feet in only one area. This deviation does not affect any abutter to the project. The one area of deviation is 18 inches, and I'll get to that in a minute. The stairway elevator enclosure at the front of the building is 6.5 feet over the single-family limit of 35 feet. That deviation is allowed as of right under section 5.31, paragraph 1 of our zoning bylaw. In fact, a deviation of 10 feet could be allowed under that section. And as I said, our stairway elevator shaft is 6.5 feet over. The high point of the roof over the synagogue exceeds the 35 feet by 1 foot, 1.5 feet, 18 inches. It is important to note when considering height on this project, as Mr. Campbell will, I'm sure, explain, the height of this project is being measured from Grove Street. The site is on the corner of Grove and Bellingham. And because the front yard is on Grove, Mr. Campbell correctly stated that the height had to be measured from Grove Street. So where the height deviates by 1.5 feet on Bellingham Road is really 10 feet less than it would be if it was measured from Bellingham Road, because there's a grade change between Grove and Bellingham of 10 feet. So if you built a single-family home on that second lot facing Bellingham Road, it could be 8.5 feet higher than our proposed height. So even though we're at 36.5 feet, if it was measured from Bellingham Road, it would be 26.5 feet. Thus, a single-family house. The rest of the building is a 2-story section, which is either 32.37 feet, well within the 35-foot maximum, or 21.20 feet in the 1-story sections. And all of those, once again, are measured from Grove Street. So if they were measured from Bellingham, it would be a 10-foot difference. But they comply with the zoning. 90% of the building's height is compliant. Any concern by our neighbors regarding height is misplaced, as the height is more reasonable than many homes on the street. In fact, if you drove down Bellingham, on the left-hand side, you see that the houses are much taller than anything we propose. On setbacks, the initial plan that was presented to the planning board had our building respecting all single-family setback dimensions. The planning board and the planning staff urged us to move the building closer to Grove and Bellingham so as to increase the setbacks to the abutters. This was done, and now all abutters have setbacks that exceed those that are required for single-family homes. Many have setbacks that comply with other structures in the zoning bylaw. The setbacks are fairly close to what is required for the other structures category in the S10 zone. The side yard single family is 10 feet, and most of the setbacks in the side yard where there are abutters are 13 to 15 feet. The rear yard single family requirement is 30 feet. Our rear yard proposed setbacks range from 36 feet to 51 feet. 2 of the 3 rear yard setbacks exceed the other structure requirement of 40 feet. The third is 36 feet less than the other structures requirement. Nicole, could you screen share the document I gave you, please?
No.
Thank you. If you look at this drawing, you will see the proposed habad in the middle, right there where the pointer was. That red line is the other structure setback line. The black line is the single-family home setback line. So you can see that we're well inside the single-family home setback line, and in some cases, we exceed the other structure line. Now, if you zoom out a little bit, you will see that we are nowhere near any of our budding neighbors. In fact, If you go clockwise, we are 136 feet from the first abutter. We are 71 feet from the second abutter. We're 95 feet from the third abutter. We're 69 feet from the fourth abutter, and we're 30 feet to the last abutter. The suggestion by counsel for the abutters that we are proposing virtually non-existent setbacks is without any factual basis. As I said, these are all exceed the single-family home setbacks. It's also important to note that the building in our side yard, the building in respect to our side yard abutter is 2 feet, 2 stories, and 3 feet less than a single-family house. Side yard abutters have a greater setback and less than height if there was an as-of-right single-family home being built. The rear yard abutters are well protected. And this is can you show the rear yard? It's the one opposite Grove. Right? Yes. No, down. Sorry, Nicole. Yeah, to the left. Yeah, that's all the way to the left is our rear yard. And the building in this location is 1 story and 21 feet high, 14 feet less than an as-of-right single-family home. The setback is 95 is significantly less than the other structure setback. In short, in our rear yard, a single-family home could be 14 feet higher and 10 feet closer than proposed. The setbacks we are proposing here are extremely reasonable and appropriate. Now, if we go to open space, counsel for the abutters states in his written communication to you that our proposal is a structure that essentially covers the entirety of both lots. That is untrue. We comply with the open space requirement. We were not cited for a deviation from open space. Building has determined we comply with the open space. Planning concurs, and we comply totally with the open space requirement. Well more open space than if a single family home was on the property. Density. The proposed square footage of the Chabad is 23,000 square feet, which is much smaller than other similar religious uses in our town. Less than 1/10 of a mile from our site, in the same zoning district, stands Temple Emmett, which has basically the same program as we do. And that is 54,245 square feet. 1/10 of a mile, same zoning district, similar location, borders on a residential street, Plowgate, and it is 54,245 square feet and has a net FAR of 0.93 with our proposed FAR of 0.82. Temple of Har Shalom, also with a similar program as ours, is 67,866 square feet with an FAR of 1.76. And Kahileth Israel is 48,836 square feet with an FAR of 1.32. As you can see, our proposed religious use, a center for Jewish living, is much less than other synagogues. Probably the most recent synagogue built was in about 1996 or 1997, which is Young Israel on Green Street. And by the way, it went through the Board of Appeals and has much less setbacks than what we're proposing. But that synagogue is right now at 22,000 square feet, significantly like ours. But it has an FAR of 1.76. Thus, I would suggest to you that compared to other Jewish institutions in town, we are one of the smallest in both square footage and FAR that we're proposing. And I think that's critically relevant because, as you know, and some of you are fairly well, probably more well-versed on Dover than I am, what is reasonable is what allows the program to operate. So, and I might say also churches in town are much larger than our proposed place of worship. First Parish Church is 32,701 square feet, and St. Mary's is 39,219 square feet. While counsel for the abutters argues that the FAR of single-family homes should apply, there is not a single religious use in town that we could find that could meet that standard. The standard suggested by counsel would effectively say no new religious uses in Brookline. Where a use is allowed, interfering with its use by imposing single-family limitation is inappropriate. Exactly what counsel for the abutters suggests you do has been directly rejected by the Supreme Judicial Court. With the court said in town of Brookline cases, coincidentally, Sisters of Holy Cross versus the town of Brookline, we think it unlikely that the legislature would exempt religious and educational institutions from local regulations of use, and at the same time permit this exemption to be virtually nullified by a requirement that such institutions construct their buildings on dimensions applicable to single-family homes. So what our abutters, what our neighbors, what their counsel suggests to you has already been heard by the court and rejected by the court. We believe our suggested FAR of 0.82 is appropriate. And it's more than appropriate when compared to every other religious use in this town. And here where we have height that's basically compliant with single family, which is compliant with single family, where we have open space that's compliant, and where we have setbacks that are compliant, the only thing not compliant with single family is FAR, and the court has rejected, forcing us to be single family. Now the journey here, this isn't the first proposal we presented. We've made concessions totally along the way. We made the building smaller, but while we were going through the planning board process by eliminating 2 classrooms, by making the kitchen that serves the social hall smaller, and shrinking the size of the lobby serving the sanctuary. We also eliminated a roof deck, which was of great concern to the neighbors, and I might say, as of right, not subject to review. Counsel for the abutters suggested the only reason we dropped the roof deck in his letter to you is because it would not have survived regulatory review. There was no regulatory review for the roof deck. It was allowed as of right. It wasn't cited in any of our zoning. But we dropped it because it was a significant point of contention with the neighbors. And not unlike other Brookline neighborhoods that don't embrace roof decks. So we dropped it. We've also agreed with the planning department and the planning board to work on a screening plan subject to the approval of the planning director, and have our direct abutters part of the decision-making process of what screening would be along their borders. We've also agreed to submit a landscaping plan that isn't required under Dover. But we want to do that because we felt the planning board felt that that was important for the neighborhood, so we agreed to it. And we've also agreed to put a lighting plan in place. Lighting is important to the synagogue for security reasons, but we also want to have the right kind of lighting that does not interfere with the neighborhood's quiet enjoyment. So we will have a lighting plan. All of this was voluntary. Council has said, and other people said, that we should have a traffic study. That's not one of the areas that Dover does not consider and does not allow. And it would be of no use, since this is an as-of-right use. Traffic study is not going to tell us anything. And it would not give us any data. And there is no, after talking to traffic engineers, there is no use code that you could possibly compare to come out with any valuable data. And as we said, Chapter 48 specifically says that may be subject to reasonable regulations concerning the bulk, height of structures, in determining yard sizes, lot area, setbacks, open space, parking, and building coverage requirements. And as I said, there is no parking requirements in Brookline for religious uses. We believe this proposal is extremely reasonable, and we ask you to join a unanimous planning board in supporting this very important project. Now, I'd like to call on Adolfo Perez to give you a brief overview of the design of this structure. Adolfo.
Hi there. So if I can share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Not yet.
Not yet?
There we go.
Okay. Would you just like me to go through each drawing?
Yeah, more into the site plan and to the elevations.
Okay. So if you can see my pointer, Mr. Allen's already described the setbacks in the site, but the entrance to the actual synagogue is from Bellingham Road, sort of in the middle of the length of the building. We have on the far left here, we have an access for some handicap parking and a couple of parking spaces. In the back, we have a playground, which is all green space, part of the open space. Along Bellingham, we have green space as well. We have a courtyard. It's an internal, well, it's open in the back, but internal courtyard. And then this is the portion of the building that was described as one story, and I'll show you that in the elevations in a minute. If I can, I'll jump to those. This bottom elevation is the elevation from Grove Street, and where my pointer is now, that's the one-story piece. There's a egress stair. Behind what you see here, I'll jump to some renderings. I'll jump around, but that's the sanctuary that was described as being 1.5 feet over the 35-foot limit. This is the northeast view. That's the kitchen, which was 2 stories, and we reduced it to 1 story and got rid of classrooms above. This is the elevation along Bellingham, the entrance. This is the one piece that's 6.5 feet over the allowed height. Originally, it included a stair that came up to the roof deck. We eliminated the roof deck, eliminated the stair to the roof. And so now this is just a 2-story space that has become sort of symbolic, will bring light into that stairwell and into the space beyond.
And it also serves as for the elevator overrun.
Right, in the back, there's an elevator core, but there's no habitable space. There's no floor. I can show you that.
Right. And that's the space that's exempt from zoning under the section that I stated earlier.
And then this is the side yard view. This is the courtyard. This is the 1-story piece on Grove. The sanctuary itself is here. And if you'll allow me to jump to some 3-dimensional views. So this is an axonometric view. Again, along Grove, you can see the entrance. And we've made an effort to break the building down into pieces so that it isn't just one massive building, but appears as a series of smaller pieces that I think is an effort to address the fact that it is in a residential neighborhood. And while it is a bigger than a single family house would be, the efforts were made to break it down. So there's that stair piece, the elevators in the back, the entrance canopy. the kitchen, the sanctuary beyond. This is looking at it from the other side. You can see the courtyard, the sanctuary. And then this will give you sort of the same view, but just from a different angle. And then these are some more photorealistic renderings. This top right would be the view from Grove and Bellingham. Again, this is the view along Bellingham. And again, here, I think you can see that from the left, we made an effort to, step the building up and down and back and front and back so that the massing is I think effectively broken down. And this top right view is just a detail of a walkway leading from the handicap spaces, parking spaces. Lower left is a view of the courtyard. And the lower right is just a view of the entrance lobby, and through that you can see the courtyard beyond. Jeffrey, would you like me to go through the plans or?
No, why don't we move on? And if the board has questions, then we'll come back and you can answer their questions specifically, unless the board wishes more detail at this time on the plans.
Mr. Allen, I think this is sufficient for now, and we will come back with any questions we may have.
Okay. Now I'd like, if you would, Nicole, could you authorize the rabbi to, yes, thank you, the rabbi. And Rabbi, thank you. This is the rabbi.
Hello, my name is Rabbi Mendy Umaner, and together with my wife, Courtney, we run the Chabad at Chestnut Hill. Firstly, I would like to thank the Zoning Board of Appeal members and all the people that work for the town for all that they do for the town on a daily basis. What an honor and pleasure it is to live here. All those that volunteer and work full time, we're grateful and we don't take it for granted. I moved here in 2001 with my wife and our 2-week-old baby, who's now 24 years old. And in 2003, the beginning of 2004, we bought the property on Bellingham Road, where we began to house our programming. And over the years, the crowds have grown, the programming has grown, and there was not enough room for us to be able to conduct the things we were conducting. And we would rent space from Brookline Public School, Lars Anderson Park, Temple MF, the malls, wherever we could find an open space, we were renting. But we were desperate to find a home that would be permanent, that would be able to house our growing community in a loving way so we could together worship and celebrate our religious observance. It became so bad that during COVID, we literally had to put up tents, which in fact, we have tents that we are using in the winter. We're outdoors part of the time because we don't have room in our current structure that we're in now, literally on a weekly basis. When we found a place we are looking at now, we bought both places hoping that we will be able to build an edifice that will be able to house our community. We understand and respect the neighbors. We do understand their concerns and have tried the best that we're able to without compromising our future and our program to work with them. And I do hope and pray that in the future, because we are going to be there, that we'll be able to work together and be good neighbors and hopefully grow to the community. When we moved here in 2003 and bought the place on Bellingham Road, there was also tremendous opposition to us coming there. And I'm happy to say that in the 20 years that we've been on Bellingham Road, I don't think the town was called once on us. The neighborhood has grown, the homes have grown more beautiful, and I think we've been good neighbors to the best that we could. We hope to do that going further. We implore and we ask the zoning board to please approve our program so we could get going with building a beautiful edifice that will beautify the community both physically and hopefully spiritually for all those that come. I thank you again for your time and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
So that would end our presentation and we look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. I have a lot of questions, so I hope that my fellow board members will be okay if I hit my list and then turn it over to each of you. The questions, and we can take this slide down. I think that most of the questions that I have are related to operations and how those operations are going to be housed and how those operations may impact the neighborhood. Mr. Allen, nobody on this board, I suspect, is going to give you an argument that this is a Dover protected use. I think we all understand that. And I appreciate the very thorough discussion about the various areas of zoning nonconformity. To me, the biggest issue here is the density nonconformity or noncompliance. And so the questions that I have are really related to that. So would you be able to please provide the board with a breakdown of anticipated occupancy both on weekdays and weekends?
Yes, and if the rabbi wants to, he can interrupt me, but generally during the week, there is a small service every morning. I've been told, and frankly, I know from personal knowledge, not because I've been attending it, but I'm a morning walker and I walk by the Chabad Chestnut Hill every morning, spring, summer, and fall. And it's about 10 to 12 worshipers every morning. And I asked the rabbi how long a service it is. He said, usually 45 minutes. And he told me, but honestly, if I get carried away, some days it's an hour. But that's generally the daily worship. Certainly on a Friday night, Shabbat, it's a larger crowd for the Shabbat services. And sometimes that's held off-site too, also with the Shabbat dinner at the rabbi's house. So that's now certainly on the high holidays and on the major holidays of the year, which are probably about 6 or 7 or 8, there is a much larger crowd, as you can imagine, as there is in every synagogue across Brookline. And I would think that this is going to be consistent with that. It's probably, I bet Ahavai Shalom, it's probably much smaller than Ahavai Shalom. It's going to be smaller than Temple Emeth, which is in the neighborhood, but it will probably be the Chabad's largest worship services of the year would be the high holidays.
And
So
can
that-
you, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but could you put some sort of estimated figure on these attendance numbers? I know that you said that currently, AM services 10 to 12 people, but I understand that part of the desire to move is because the existing facility cannot accommodate demand. So how many people are anticipated, once the new facility is built to attend morning services, Friday Shabbat services, high holidays, etc.?
I'd simply say, go ahead, Rabbi.
I'll answer on that. Most of what we're looking to move is not because of our morning services. Unfortunately, people are not morning people. In fact, we barely get a minyan. Some days, tomorrow we don't have because we couldn't get a minyan, and today we didn't have a quorum. Some days it could be 5, 10, maybe it'll grow to 20. I don't see that growing more. I just want to add one thing which I didn't mention before, that every morning between 7:15 and 8 o'clock, and I don't know if this is town approved, there is 2 bus stops in front of the temple on Bellingham Road. I think from South Dexter Field and another school, and probably 20 cars at least park on the street, and especially in the winter, they're there waiting 10, 15 minutes and they're constantly there. So there's much more than we would ever be. But that's there. I don't know how the town works with that, but that's a separate thing. On Friday nights, we don't have a service every week, but we tend to have a service every week once going forward. I would hope there would be between 20 and 40 people on a Friday night. Saturday morning now, we have over 100 people on a Saturday, about 100 people. And some of them are kids, so it's different, small kids, but I'm hoping that it grows by 10, 15%, but I don't know. It's a mixed community, so there's many different things that go on, and I can't put a number or projection to what it may be, but we definitely hope that a temple is a place for people to pray and that people will use it to pray.
Of course. And
the high holidays, I think you told me, Rabbi, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you rent the auditorium at Baker School, and this past year you had about 200 worshipers.
Yeah, we also had a lot of kids, so I don't know how you count that, but in the adults, it was about that, maybe, you know, and depending on peak or non-peak, sometimes it was 100, sometimes it was 2, maybe 225, I don't know.
Okay, and how many of, and we can do this through, you know, we can break it down in the same lines that we've been talking about it, weekday services, Shabbat services, Saturday morning, high holidays. How many congregants are coming on foot versus driving?
I would say about, to be honest, probably 30% are walking, maybe a little more, and the rest are driving. Some of them live in the neighborhood, but they still drive. I, for example, live on West Roxbury Parkway. I have 2 neighbors next to me that walk. I have neighbors behind me on Goodnow and Alberta and roads like that walk. Walcott, I could go on and on, but there's on South Street, on Bellingham itself, and many other streets. But that's what I would say. Again, I don't want to, that's the ballpark.
I understood. And if you don't have exact numbers, that's absolutely fine. I just wanted to get a sense of sort of order of magnitude of people arriving in cars versus walking. I understand from the plans that there is also anticipated to be a religious preschool and potentially a religious school on the premises. Can you tell us a little bit more about those expected operations?
So we have a Sunday school every Sunday morning at our current location, with between 40 and 50 children on a Sunday morning. I anticipate that to stay there, maybe go up to 70 in that vicinity. That's on a Sunday. For a preschool, we plan to start with one class of 10 kids, possibly, depending on how we are able to facilitate it, and maybe go up to 20, 30 and see where it goes. But we don't have a preschool, so it's very hard for me to project that. But there is no Jewish preschool within, I would say, 3 miles of where we are. There used to be one at Emeth that was taken over by Beep and is not a Jewish preschool anymore. And many people, especially young families that come, are requesting that.
And and for the educational component, both for the preschool, Sunday school, and adult education, we have 6 classrooms. As we originally designed the building, there were 8 classrooms. We deleted 2 during the planning board process.
Now, Mr. Allen, could either you or the project architect walk us through where pickups and drop-offs for the Sunday school and preschool are going to take place?
They would take place on Bellingham, but like Beep and like all the other preschools in town that we looked at, they would be structured time-wise, so that we would have either 4 or 5 different times for drop-off and pickup, so that we would have either 20% or 25% at any given 15-minute window.
Okay.
That's how I'm told that's how Beep does it, and there's another one near the Brookline Village that does it the same way, and that's what we would be doing.
And what is, thank you for that answer. And what is the parking plan for folks who are coming, you know, either the 20 to 40 people coming on Shabbat, the 200 people coming on high holidays, the 100 people on Saturday mornings? Where will those folks park?
They will park where they park for every synagogue in Brookline, which is on the street.
On the street, okay.
If, for instance, I know that I park at the Longwood Mall where the beech trees are to go to a Habay Shalom, as does everybody else. Brookline has a specific zoning provision that says there shall be no parking requirement for.
Understood, but that's separate and apart from the neighborhood impact, right? And so that's why I'm asking these questions. I'm not implying in any way that we're trying to impose a zoning requirement for parking on this Dover protected use. I know that you said that you've not done a traffic study. I do wonder if anyone on your team has done any kind of projections, you know, based on ITE, but if it's not a full-blown traffic study.
We have not, and there is no, because of the nature of the synagogue, and there is no ITE from the traffic engineers I talked to, there is no ITE standard that could be applied that would come out with any realistic projection. And since traffic studies are usually functions of use, where the use is protected, we don't think that that would be incredibly helpful.
So land use code 562, which is for a synagogue, wouldn't apply to this?
No, because of it, to apply the 562, which applies to a synagogue, taking Temple Emmett at 56,000 feet, comparing to us at 23,000 feet, and us being a conservative Orthodox synagogue is different than a Reformed synagogue, and those dramatically different. The rabbi said he thinks 30 to 35% walk. I know in a Reformed synagogue, nobody walks.
Right, sure. I understand your point, but I think, again, it's difficult without any sort of data about actual number of trips and the distribution of those trips and neighborhood streets to fully understand the impact of use of this size, scale, and density in this location.
But if the use is protected, what value does the traffic study give you since the use is protected? Because
Well,
let me just finish. Because you could strip this project naked, but the one thing it would always have is the synagogue, which is going to always generate the attendance. So that the use, I don't think a traffic study is going to do anything but cost the synagogue money and is not going to yield any results that affects the zoning. Because the bulk, the density is not what attracts the people, the synagogue does. And that's always going to be there.
but the size of the synagogue, I think I read somewhere, and I apologize if I'm quoting your opponents as opposed to something that you or your client had said, but I thought the philosophy was a little bit like, if you build it, they'll come. I think it was my understanding, and having sat on other projects like this, you build a larger capacity because you want to attract more folks and give more folks the ability to come and worship and use the facilities.
But
And
Go ahead.
Ironically, I just want to chime in here for 1 second. Ironically, the slogan of our campaign is "They came and now we're building it," as opposed to everywhere else where they say build it and they'll come. And in fact, we're already on Bellingham Road, and we already have 100 people every Sabbath, and we already have cars parked there constantly. And of course, we never did a study at our first place. But I'm just saying that the trajectory of build it and they'll come is not what we're using and not what happened with us, as in our history, and as you could see in any research you'll do about who we are and what we did.
so, Rabbi, is it not your expectation that in a larger facility, you will be able to host larger gatherings?
What I'm hoping, first of all, I'm not a prophet. What I'm hoping more than anything is that in our new location, we won't be having to rent space all over and feel homeless. It's not fear for the people. It's not fear for us. It's very difficult. We don't have enough space for children. It's just a very hard thing. And we're doing it, in all honesty, out of desperation. It's hard for me. It's a challenge to build what we want to build. And it's something that we're really doing because we are choked in every sense of the way by what's happening. In fact, just this year, we've had so many people come on a Sabbath morning, kids running around, having nowhere to run. And I think that that's my greatest hope. After that, I don't know, but I also believe that I have a track record of 20 years in the neighborhood and how we treated our neighborhood and the people. And we grew from there too, from when we started to where we are today.
I think where the use is protected, I think protecting the use is protecting the people in the sanctuary to worship and to come, and the density is driven by the synagogue, and it's like every church, and It's no mistake that this is one of those, and it might be because of the modern times, but if you look across this town, every synagogue, or most synagogues, are much bigger than this. The one right down the street, Temple Emmett, is 56,000 square feet. So I'm hard pressed to understand how a 23,000 square foot could be unreasonable when it borders a 56,000 square foot temple.
Thank you for emphasizing that point, Mr. Allen. I am assuming from what you have said that you and your client would not be willing to agree to a condition restricting parking on neighborhood streets.
No, absolutely not. In fact, I can tell you from my service as on the select board, it is the policy of the town not to enforce the 2-hour parking ban on religious holidays. And it's not enforced on Sundays for churches. It's not enforced on any temples. And it's long been the policy of this town. And I was in town meeting when we voted the ban. We amended the bylaw to say that there was no parking requirement for religious institutions. And it was for just this very reason, to encourage people to attend religious services.
Right. But Mr. Allen, as you know, and you acknowledged at the outset of your comments, this board needs to do a balancing between the Dover protected use and, the legitimate municipal concerns, which include, public health and safety. And, many of the neighbors have raised questions with respect to the impact of traffic on their neighborhood streets, which is why I'm asking these questions.
Yeah, but
You
I think,
understand.
and I noticed that town council was, first assistant town council is here. And right at the beginning of this process, this question came up at the planning board or the planning staff. And if the zoning doesn't, Dover allows reasonable application of zoning items on density, height, setbacks, and so forth. But if there is no zoning provision applicable, then town council said it can't be applied to the use.
I
So
understood, but I don't,
now-
but I don't think anyone here is arguing that we could not apply the FAR regulations of the town if we had a counterbalancing significant municipal interest. So let me ask the next question, which is related to the Dover analysis, which is whether you are asserting here that compliance with the FAR requirements of the bylaw that would apply to this project otherwise, would impair the usefulness of the property for its proposed uses.
Absolutely. That's why I think.
Please say more about that.
That's why I think I quoted is it the Sisters of the Holy Cross?
You did.
Yeah, I think that's exactly applicable. If we weren't allowed to have the FAR we've requested, we would not be able to do the educational mission we propose, the educational permission process that is central to the Chabad, and we would not be able to have the religious services that we propose because of that. And it's totally inappropriate under Dover, I would suggest, to apply single-family home FAR to a religious institution. And that's exactly, and you're familiar with the case, probably more so than I am, the Sisters of the Holy Cross versus the town of Brookline. So, I think that we're absolutely asserting that a significant diminution in FAR would not only impair our ability, would restrict our ability.
Understood. And when you say a significant diminution, does that mean that there actually could be room to, I know that there have been changes to the project in response to neighborhood and planning board feedback, and it did result in a reduction from what I believe was a 0.92 FAR to a 0.8 something FAR, which I think, the board
0.82.
greatly appreciates. But, you said a significant reduction in FAR would in fact impair the synagogue's ability to undertake its proposed religious functions. But does that mean that there is additional FAR that could be given up as a way of sort of mediating between the legitimate municipal and neighborhood concerns and the proposed programming here?
I don't believe there is, and I don't believe it would, you know, mesh into any real difference. I mean, if you wanted to take a bathroom or two, that's fine, but that's gonna be 100 square feet. That's not gonna change the operation. It's just gonna impact people. But I think the most significant, we did two things in the process, and maybe we should have waited and done them at the end of the process. I don't know. That's always a strategic decision, but the planning board was very receptive, and that's why we did it. I think the greatest neighborhood change we made and the loudest uproar was the roof deck where the rabbi, it was the toughest one to convince the rabbi to do, I'll be quite honest with you, because it was designed to be an outdoor worship space for Simchat Torah and certain Jewish holidays that harvesting and so forth. So it was very important to the rabbi, and we got him to give it up. And that was a very significant give back to the neighborhood. And we also took those two classrooms out because that was also significant because it was allowed us to drop the rear yard to 1 story. And we thought that would alleviate the impact to the rear and side yard neighbor there on the corner. So it's significant. And you know, the other thing some neighbors wanted, but it just didn't work, is move the playground. Well, we can't move the playground for several reasons, logistically and also security wise. So we couldn't make that concession because of the security concerns.
Okay, I have one more question before I turn this over to other board members, and I appreciate their indulgence and yours as I go through my list of questions. Are you also making an argument to this board that compliance with the otherwise applicable FAR requirements has an undue cost on the project? Or would have an undue cost on the project?
Now, I lost you. Reducing the FAR would have an undue cost?
That's my question, yes.
I don't think, I think it wouldn't have an undue cost. It certainly would raise the cost per square foot, but its real damages, we couldn't carry out our mission. I think that's really our argument. We couldn't have the synagogue. We couldn't have the social hall, which is the flex space. And most importantly, we couldn't run the religious schools that we need to run.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Allen. Jesse Geller, have you any questions?
I do, but I thank you. You actually paralleled many of the questions that occurred to me. The first one, and Mr. Allen, this is actually for you. I just want to make sure, I think I heard it this way, but I want to make certain. Programmatically, are any of the programs that will be going on within this facility for the benefit of third parties?
No. No. I asked that question right at the beginning to the rabbi. Every program that takes place here, every social event that would take place here would be Chabad related. It's not for rent. It's no third parties. Absolutely not. It's all going to be Chabad functions.
This Chabad related?
Yes.
Okay. So there's been a fair amount of discussion, and I thank the rabbi for actually touching on the subject that was foremost in my consideration, which was programmatic. What drives this, right? So I appreciate sort of the broad explanation of the programmatic needs here. I would then turn to the architect and say, what's the magic? What's the science? When the rabbi says, these are the uses we need, these are the numbers, how does that translate into a building that we have here proposed?
But I can answer that partially because that was part of the discussion. And in fact, when I went back to that, I think it was case maybe 10 years ago, the educational case I cited when John Bookeye spoke, the current chair asked the then other Mr. Allen to go through the conference rooms and other things and how they related to the program. So in preparing tonight, I did a breakdown of the rooms and how they relate to the program. And I'm somewhat disappointed you didn't ask me since I was all prepared for that question. But what we looked at is what the rabbi projected as day one and dream. For instance, we came up with basically four classrooms we ended up with for the preschool. It'd be 3 to 4. And that was in the middle. We originally had another classroom, 7, no, 5, but we cut it out. As I said, one of the 2 we cut out, so that we don't want to be in the position that 5 years from now, we're out of space. At the same point, we don't want empty space. So we looked at what a projection for a preschool could be and came up with that four classrooms were safe and probably where we would cut off and be able to service. Then we have 2 classrooms for the Sunday school, which may be a little short, and that's why we have some flex space. We have some conference rooms and flex space, which can be used by people that, like when you're coming up on Hanukkah, they do a lot of Hanukkah celebrations. But before a celebration, you have people, volunteers in planning those celebrations and doing so. So that's when they'd use the flex space. When you're approaching Passover and they're planning on a Seder, you have volunteers in there for weeks before doing the planning. They would use these flex spaces. I think we have 2 flex spaces. So, and then there'd be a fundraising drive. So you may be using 1 flex space. So all of those, we really spent the better part of the summer and the spring last year, and we were all involved, Adolfo, the rabbi, and I, and drilling down on what the program would be and what the program needs would be. And I think the rabbi, if you want to unmute yourself, wants to add to this. But that's how we sort of got to the mix of the classrooms and the flex space. You also have to remember one of the reasons, giving exact numbers and track such, this is not a synagogue where there's membership. You want to come, you come. There's no membership. It survives on fundraising, and that's why a lot of administrative staff does that. But if you want to come pray on Rosh Hashanah, you come pray. It's different in that sense. Rabbi, you wanted to say something?
I just want to add 2 things. When we hired our architect and when we begun the project, the most important thing was to make as much flex space as possible so it could balance off each other and work in different time for different things. And I think we tried to compromise in every way we could on what we'll use. For example, there's not nearly enough office space for a camp and a preschool and a rabbi and so on. And we're planning to have open space that could couple over each other or other areas that could be used during the week as office space. The driving part of this project was aesthetically to look beautiful and warm and opening and nice in the community, and to use every inch of space we could in a reasonable way so we could build it small as possible, not just for zoning issues, but for cost issues, because as we all know, the cost of a square foot is quite expensive to build. So that was a great emphasis of what we did.
Thank you. Jeffrey, one more question?
My pleasure.
Wouldn't-
Maybe.
So, well, whether or not it's your pleasure.
I'll answer it either way.
Exactly. So I thought Johanna asked appropriate questions about traffic notwithstanding your argument that it goes to use. Okay. Wouldn't the question about traffic enable the board not only to consider scale, but also to consider whether there are appropriate regulatory conditions to address the bubble?
Just the what?
Address the bubble, the potential that for Shabbat morning or for the high holidays or Simchas Torah, that there's a large number of vehicles that suddenly appear that increases the concerns about safety.
But isn't that true of every religious institution in town? Do we do a traffic study for St. Mary's on Christmas Eve? Do we do a traffic study for First Parish on Easter?
Well, they're not in front
But
of,
are they asking for zoning
Do we do a
relief for the
traffic-
porch?
right.
Oh, they were built, but we're not asking for zoning relief. In this sense, we're asking to build under the Dover Amendment. We answered what I think to make a comparison, the 4 questions: height, density, and I think it's justified in those. So, in other words, if we were to have a regulatory, let's say we had a regulatory restriction, let's say, for Rosh Hashanah, that would put us, that would be like impacting the right of people to come to the Chabad. Well, I'm not sure what you'd say by a regulatory restriction.
So we have a requirement about traffic flow to ease choke points.
But we coming
have-
off 4-lane
We
roadway.
do plenty of traffic. We do plenty of these projects where we propose conditions that address specific traffic issues, whether they relate to, bump outs on sidewalks so that the pedestrians have a shorter distance to walk. Conditions, nothing that goes to the use, but conditions that address potential safety issues that arise due to whatever's going on.
But isn't that impacting the use?
I don't think so.
I do, and I think that I don't think we've ever done that in Brookline on any religious institution.
I didn't sit on Green Street, which is the only comparison that I think we have. So I can't say what, if any, traffic review there was.
I don't think anybody's alive that sat on Green Street as I read the decision.
Green Street's not that old.
That's sad.
That show is 30 years old.
Right, but it was Bailey Silbert, it was Diane, and I don't know how Ken is, but Ken was the chair.
Yeah.
So I don't think. I think taking restrictions or regulatory steps that might be correct for a shopping mall, a doctor's office, an apartment building, or a run-of-the-mill commercial, or even a residential subdivision, and applying it to a religious institution is correct. I can tell you this town has never done it. I think it's a slippery slope, and the town has gone to great lengths not to do it, just the same way as you can't find a parking ticket in this town on the Jewish holidays, because that's a policy. You can't find a temple that pays for a police detail on the Jewish holiday. That's policy. We go to
Say that again, Jeffrey, say that
You
again.
can't find a police detail that's paid for on the Jewish holidays, unless they've changed the policy without publicizing it. And I can't imagine the type of restriction you're envisioning. I mean, historically, religious institutions have been placed in neighborhoods. just like Green Street, just like all of them, because that's where the people are. And even if you look at the churches generally, they're all in neighborhoods. And so, yes, when you have a synagogue, I live 2 streets away from Temple Emeth. On Rosh Hashanah, I can't park on the street here. There's not a space available. Or on Yom Kippur, or if there's a big funeral. That's just a fact of life. And there is when there's a big funeral, there's traffic and on West Roxbury Parkway, and it's difficult. But that's because religious institutions are in neighborhoods, because that's where the people are. And this one more than the other, just like Green Street. Green Street, I bet you 60% of the congregants walk to show.
I assume at Green Street, all of the congregants walk.
I was giving them the benefit of the doubt, but but so what I'm saying is I can't imagine a regulatory restriction that wouldn't be invasive.
No, well,
What are you going to say? You can't park on the even side, the offside? Certainly, as a good neighbor, synagogues reach out to the congregants and say, try not to park here, try not to park there, make sure you don't block driveways, and go out and inspect that. Yes, that's something that we would do, and I think most.
but wouldn't those things be predicated on a review or an audit of traffic?
No, I mean, it's just common sense. You don't want people's driveways being blocked. You don't want people, the impact of this synagogue on this neighborhood will be no different than the impact of Temple Emeth on this neighborhood. 54,000 square feet on the high holidays, on bar mitzvahs. And they have a giant social hall. And they do rent it out to third parties, something we won't. So I can tell you, as a neighbor of Temple Emeth, there's no way the Chabad at Chestnut Hill will create the impact that Temple Emeth does. Not only do they rent it out to third parties, they have the town of Brookline beat program there with no drop-off, but staggered, as I said. So this impact in this precinct will be less from the Chabad of Brookline than it is from Temple Emeth by eons. Temple Emeth is mammoth.
Okay. Thank you. That's it. Johanna, that's all I have.
Thank you, Jesse. Wadner, thank you for your patience. Do you have questions for the applicant?
Yes, I do. I have a couple questions. You have listed 3 different operational needs for the facility, the structure you proposed. Which one is going to be the primary purpose of the use? Which one of the 3 that you listed?
I think they're all interconnected. Well, they're all interconnected. Worship certainly is the main focus of any religious institution, but I think the educational component meshes into the worship, and then you have the administrative necessary to run it. But I think any synagogue's main purpose is worship.
So if that's so, and you keep referring to the Dover Amendment, the Dover Amendment say the educational part, the program has to be significant, the most primary dominant purpose for the use. So can you explain, you claiming religious institution, at the same time you're trying to be covered under the Dover Amendment. So can you explain that? Because if you're trying to claim the Dover Amendment, the educational portion has to be the dominant purpose of the use.
No. As a religious use, we're under the Dover Amendment. All of our education is religious. This is not a private, and even if it was, it would be educational under Dover. But I mean, this is a religious education, and it's religious worship. Any religious use under Dover is protected. It's also protected under Res Lupa, but I don't think we have to go there because the Dover Amendment sort of mirrors it in Massachusetts. And the reason we had to use it in preservation is because there was an argument that Dover didn't reach outside of 40A, so to bootstrap it, we did Ray Loose, but I don't think we need to go there now because it sort of mirrors Dover. But the religious use is protected.
Okay, so would you that I do understand that. The reason why I'm asking our members, the board, they've been asking the questions about where the municipality they have they've been authorized by the Dover Amendment to imply reasonable restriction that as long as reasonable. And then the question we've been having here is about the parking, the use, whether, you know. So how would you explain that?
The parking,
The safety concern related to the traffic and the parking, you're trying to make two arguments, one on the religious institution, one on the Dover, where on the Dover, the board has the authority to look at the parking.
no, it doesn't.
As
No, it doesn't. It does not. Under Dover, generally, it has a right to reasonably apply our zoning bylaw in a manner to the institution. So, and this is what what Mr. Simpson said to the planning board. You can take, for instance, the FAR, but you have to apply it in a reasonable manner. But since the bylaw has no parking requirement for a religious use, you cannot apply it to a religious use in any manner because it doesn't exist. There is no parking requirement under 6.023C for any religious use in Brookline to have a parking requirement.
I get that. I agree with that. That's the reason why I asked the question, what is the primary purpose? And since the language of the Dover Amendment is very clear, the educational part has to be it has to be significant. Part of the
religious
to be.
Right, and Mr. Allen, if I can just interrupt for a second, Wadner, I don't think that there's a question as to whether this is a legitimate and fully Dover use. I think we really are charged at this point with analyzing whether or not the areas of non-compliance, are things that we should be enforcing, notwithstanding that this is a Dover protected use. Just chiming in for whatever that's worth.
No, I understand that. It's just where the concern that if you look at the Dover, it's allowed the board.
Absolutely, but I don't think
as it is reasonable.
Analysis is helpful here.
Yeah, so that was the question that we, it's just like we kind of playing on both sides. One, it's there's the religious exception that not require parking, and also making that argument that on the Dover, so we don't have to, because it's a religious institution, so we don't have to look at parking as an issue or other safety reason. So is that the argument that you?
The argument I'm making is that we are clearly a religious use, both in our worship and our education. This is not it's a Jewish preschool, it's a Jewish Sunday school, it's teaching religion, and it's worshiping religion. So in all respects, it's a protected Dover use. There's no non-Dover use of this property. So, and I would say to you that given our setbacks, given our height, given our compliance in the open space, really, because I like to shoot it straight, really the issue here is density. That's where there's a variance from the single family requirement. And that's why because we comply, we have substantial setbacks. We basically comply with height. We comply with open space. But there is a variance. I don't want to use the word variance because it's not a variance, but there is a difference between what is prescribed by the zoning bylaw and the FAR. And that's why I think the Sisters of the Holy Cross versus the town of Brookline is so instructive in that it is inappropriate to apply the single family standard. Now, what standard should be applied? That's a question for the board, I grant you. But I think we know that the single family standard is not appropriate. But I would suggest the standard should be applied as for other religious uses. And on FAR, we're about the lowest of them all. This is a small, for a religious use, this is a small structure.
Do you have the map, a map of the other institution that you cited so that well, it would be helpful to have an idea where they're actually sitting and located.
Oh yeah, I know where they all are. Temple Emeth is right next door from where I'm sitting.
Well, in terms of to compare where the proposed structure that
I did it today.
Mm.
The Temple Emeth is less than 1/10 of a mile from our proposed site. Less than 1/10 of a mile, according to my odometer.
Well, I know you're saying that, but if we have a map in terms of where they're each sitting in the map that compare what you propose, it would have been, been very helpful, at least to me, to kind of have an idea.
Well, Temple Emeth is right off of Putterham Circle. It borders on Plowgate, and it borders, I forget the street, South Street. So it's on 2 neighborhood streets and 2 2 busier streets, and it's less than 1/10 of a mile from our site. And it's more than twice our size, proposed size.
Thank you.
I think Young Israel is also on a comparable street too. It's a residential street because it's back in that second block, which is a residential block.
Wadner, are you all set with your questions?
Yes, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, is there anything else that you would like to add in closing before we move on to town staff?
No, I think I've said it all unless I've left something. I probably said too much.
We all always say too much, Mr. Allen. It's occupational hazard. We are going to have public comments, which we will get to momentarily, but I think that before we do that, I know I have at least one question for Mr. Campbell, which I think will be helpful for our discussion going forward and for potentially for public comment. I also would like to ask some questions of town council before we move on to public comment. So Paul Campbell, are you still around?
I am.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. I haven't seen you in a while. So one factual question I just wanted to clarify before we go into the public comment portion of the hearing. I believe, and Mr. Allen, if I'm misquoting you, feel free to jump in and correct me, but I believe that I understood Mr. Allen to tell the board that the portion of the building that is 6.5 feet over height is actually exempt from zoning. And I was hoping that you could either confirm that or clarify that for the board.
So on that portion at the front of the building that is tied to the stairwell and the elevator overrun, I actually did not have the opportunity to discuss that with the building commissioner. So I really don't feel comfortable opining on the applicability of 531 to that specific section of the building, just because I did not have an opportunity to discuss that with the building commissioner. And I am sorry to this board for this response, but again, there were so much changes to the plans that I did not have an opportunity to discuss it with the building commissioner.
Understood. Thanks, Paul. Jonathan Simpson, your turn in the hot seat. Where are you?
Right here.
Mr. Allen, if you're speaking, you are muted. You're welcome to add a clarifying comment before we start talking to town council.
The stairwell that Paul refers to and I refer to has recently changed, because clearly when we had the roof deck and it was the access to the roof deck, it was not exempt from the zoning under that section. But now that since it has no access to the roof and its only purpose is the stairway and the elevator, I think it falls under that section because it does not have human occupancy. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. And Paul Campbell, if you want to give that some thought while we're chatting with town council, please do. I'm not, again, trying to put you under the microscope here. If you got something to say about it by the time Jonathan's done, so be it. If you don't, that's fine too.
Madam Chair, if I can respond right now, if
Okay.
that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so just the first basically the first section of 531, I just again I just didn't have an opportunity to see if that specific architectural feature falls under the items listed under exemptions under section 531.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep.
Hi, Jonathan Simpson. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Happy to be here.
I know that I've got a bunch of questions for you, and perhaps other members of the board do too. I don't know if there's any kind of statement you want to make, or if you want to just dive in with some questions and hopefully some helpful answers.
We can just go to the questions. We're already 90 minutes in, so.
We are, thank you. Town council, timekeeper, all sorts of things, lots of hats tonight. Could you provide a very, again, 90 minutes in, brief overview of, the body of Dover Amendment case law that sets the permissible parameters in which the board can apply local zoning regulations to what I think we all agree is a Dover protected use?
Certainly. So the standard, as it's been mentioned several times tonight, is that regulations can be applied if they are reasonable and they serve a municipal purpose. The reasonableness is really where the bulk of the factual inquiry lies, and the board has already done a lot of work tonight trying to get into it. The leading case, in my opinion, is the Martin case, which is the Belmont case, where the Church of Latter-day Saints, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, was constructing a worship house there. And they characterize the reasonableness standard, sort of importing it from a case with an educational use, which was the Tufts College case, that said, said there are many ways to define unreasonableness. It does not require that you essentially make the use a nullity. A regulation can be unreasonable and still allow the use to occur, but it can still be unreasonable under the Dover Amendment. For example, if it detracts from the usefulness of the structure, if it imposes excessive costs, or if it impairs the character of the structure. The character in that sense is, of course, the religious character, although the Hume Christian Camp case from a couple of years ago is really another in a long line of very broad readings of what can be considered a religious purpose, religious aspects of a purpose. So I do not want anyone on this meeting to think that you could impair portions of what Mr. Allen was describing. I think, as you just said, Madam Chairwoman, the entire Chabad should be considered a religious and in character. So so you sort of have to take all of the regulations, and then assuming that they have a municipal purpose, which I believe in this case that the list is fairly limited, and I think we can make a pretty good case that all of them have a legitimate municipal purpose. You start to then apply them one by one. It is the applicant's burden to show that if applied in the manner the board is proposing, it would unreasonably impact their use of the property.
Okay. Are we able legitimately under Dover to apply our zoning to address privacy concerns?
To address privacy concerns?
Mm-hmm.
That is, and if they are swept into So the list of concerns from our zoning bylaw, you're allowed to address them if they're considered one of the purposes under our zoning bylaw, and our zoning bylaw includes, as it's in its purposes, appropriate use of land, overcrowding, conserving the value, lessening the congestion of traffic, preventing undue concentration, providing for adequate light and air, reducing the hazards from fire and other dangers, assisting in the economical provision of transportation, water, sewage, schools, parks, and other public facilities, preserving and increasing the amenities of the town, encouraging the preservation of historically and architecturally significant structures, encouraging housing opportunities for people of all income levels, and providing for adequate open space. However, privacy can certainly fit within several of those listed purposes. But I would, I believe it. When I was on the planning board, Linda Hamlin would often say, we are an urban community. There is a certain, there is privacy, and then there is an understanding that we do all have to live somewhat cheek to jowl here in Brooklyn.
What about applying our zoning or enforcing our zoning regulations to protect neighborhood character?
Neighborhood character, that unless it is of historical nature, I do not think that I believe you need to tie it to some other purpose within our zoning. Neighborhood character is a famously sort of nebulous concept. Many people try to tie it to house value, but that in and of itself is often a very can only provide sort of a limited grounds for basing your zoning decisions or subsequent appeals on.
Okay. Are we able to ask the applicant for a traffic or parking study? I know that, we don't have before us a request for parking relief. That is very clear. But, based on the questions that I was asking, it's obvious that at least one board member thinks that parking and traffic impacts are related to, intensity of use, which is related to the density and FAR of this project. Are we precluded by the fact that this is a Dover amendment project from asking the applicant for a traffic study or a parking study?
Well, I don't want to be too cute. You can always ask, but in terms of requiring one, I believe the answer, Frank, based on especially on what I've heard today in the discussion, I do believe the answer is no. As Attorney Allen noted, their parking requirements are not applicable here. Therefore, there is no regulation to try to make reasonable in this state when it comes to parking. And I think that requiring a parking study with no regulation underpinning it would be questionable. Similarly, the traffic study, it was noted that the traffic impacts are related to the religious use. You would be, in effect, seeking a traffic study that is already, the traffic impacts of these structures are acknowledged to be cyclical in a way. And as was already discussed at this hearing, the idea that you'd be conditioning some of it on the traffic patterns that are specific to this religious use is, I think, threatens some of the uniformity on which we are allowed to regulate this religious use under both the Dover Amendment and RLUIPA. So I would be very cautious, particularly because the main way the town imposes the requirement to provide a traffic study is through our design review process, which they are exempt from under the Dover.
Okay. Related question, is there, in fact, a town policy or guideline or regulation that would prohibit this board from including in any potential approval of this project a condition requiring a police detail for large events or holidays?
I do not think that would be appropriate here. However, The police are certainly a resource. If a problem arose, they could be a resource to use to try to correct a problem that was existing sort of as applied on site. Preemptively requiring it based on the religious practices of the institution, I do not believe is an appropriate use of our zoning authority.
Okay. My final question before I let Jesse and Wadner have their crack at you is I know that there's concern in the neighborhood about stormwater impacts from this particular design, not the use, right, but the design and impervious area. And I would like to get confirmation that the project will be subject to the town's normally extremely rigorous engineering and DPW stormwater review, even though it's a Dover use. Or are they going to
Yes.
be able to get out of it by invoking our LUPA or the Dover Amendment or anything like that?
No, the bulk of the authority to regulate the stormwater impacts comes from our general bylaw, which is of course not zoning. Although I do note that it is often a condition of our special permits that they comply with all of the stormwater regulations, that they work with the director of engineering and transportation to meet all of the requirements, to submit a plan demonstrating the drainage. That's sort of belt and suspenders. The requirements come from the general bylaw. They will still be subject to all of those requirements.
And we're not going to claim any exemption.
Well, Mr. Allen, I'm glad that you're unmuted because I was going to ask you that question because you made the mistake of unmuting yourself while I was on the topic.
Well, because I knew it. Said, no, we're not going to claim any exemption on that, and nor do we. And in
Not
the
through our LUPA or anything like that.
No, in fact, when we went to court on Ray Lupa on the preservation issue on the demolition, we specifically put in our filings that we were seeking only to be exempted from the 1-year ban, but we fully intended to comply with all federal, state, and local regulations having to do with demolition, and we have. So the same situation would arise here.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Simpson, thank you for indulging me with my questions. Jesse Geller, do you have any questions for town council?
I did, but they seem to have all been asked and answered. Hello, Jonathan. Good job.
Thank you, Jesse.
Wadner, any questions that you might have for Jonathan?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, great. Thanks. Jonathan, you're off the hot seat. We will come back to planning and building after public comment. Nicole, you are going to serve as our host for public comment. I note that there are 79 participants on this Zoom call, which in my experience, serving on this board for over a decade is the greatest number of participants I've ever seen at a ZBA hearing. So I want to start by thanking everyone for their interest and participation in our civic process. I also want to let folks know that we did receive 125 pages, I believe, of public comment and have read all of them. So we are well aware of the community concerns. This is not to necessarily discourage folks from speaking this evening, but if you've already submitted written comments, please rest assured that we've seen them and read them. And as hopefully you can tell by the questions we've been asking, have taken them and are taking them into consideration as we weigh the proposal in front of us. It is almost 9 o'clock, and I definitely want to give everybody who wishes to speak an opportunity to do so, but I also would like all of us to be able to go to bed at some point tonight. So I think, Nicole, are you planning to use a timer for public comment this evening?
Yes, that was what I had planned.
And what is your timer? 3, 5, how many minutes are we using?
We have 30 people signed up to speak, so I was thinking 2 minutes, but if you'd like to do longer, that's up to you.
Why don't we do 2 minutes per commenter? There are a few things that I want to say before we turn this over to public comment, in addition to all the other things I just said. I do know that some neighbors are represented by counsel. As a matter of courtesy, we typically allow a lawyer to present first. So we will hear from counsel first, assuming that they are here and wish to present to the board. We do have some letters in the record from them already. And I think that, to the extent that you are one of the neighbors who is represented by counsel, I would ask that perhaps you consider allowing your counsel to speak on your behalf instead of taking time to, chime in and say, and as my counsel said, the other thing I would ask folks is if, you are later in the queue and you have heard someone say your same comment, you don't need to repeat the comment. You can just say, for the reasons cited by my neighbors, I oppose or support this project. I also want to note that this is really about the application of our zoning regulations. So opinions about whether Chabad is wonderful, or if you don't agree with what they're doing, that's not really helpful to the process. This is really about zoning and not about the use. And then the last thing before we start public comment is just a reminder to folks to please be respectful and civil in your discourse. This is a volunteer board, but more importantly, the other folks here are your neighbors, your kids' parents, people you run into at the gym, at the grocery store, in the dog park. And so please treat everyone with due respect. And with that, Nicole, please open the queue.
Yes, I asked Peter Carr, who had submitted a letter on behalf of several clients, if he'd like to speak, and he did not respond.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and start with the first person that signed up, Boris Kurtznick.
Nicole, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I apologize for being delayed. I was on another meeting. My partner, Rob Levy, is here, and he was going to present some remarks. So I'll defer to Rob, and then I would, if the board would permit, if at the end to wrap up, I would also just defer. So I'll let Rob Levy start off, and then I think most importantly is that there's so many folks here that are neighbors and abutters and they should really be heard. But I'll let Rob go first, and then I'll stand down for now. But thank you, Nicole, and I apologize to this board for being late. I had something else going on tonight. So to your point about personal issues, I just had those got wrapped around the axle for me. So thank you for that.
Okay. Robert Levy, then go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Good evening, Madam Chairman. My name is Robert Levy. I'm with the law firm of Eckert, Stevens, Sherman, Malott in Boston. Our firm represents the direct abutters as well as several other neighborhood members of this community. At the outset, we want to make sure you understand nobody on our side objects to the use of the property. We understand the use as a religious facility is protected by the Dover Amendment, and there's nobody who suggests otherwise. As you can see, there are numerous people, numerous neighbors who want to speak, as to their personal impact this project will have upon them. So I'll leave it to them, throughout the course of tonight. The major concerns, as you have already focused on, is the size, the bulk, the dimensions of this project. It's a beautiful building. I don't think anybody says it's not. The problem is it's just in the wrong location. It's located in an extremely residential area with mostly 1950-esque, ranch houses. I should say, I know the area quite well. I was born on Wallace Road. I'm a graduate of the Edith C. Baker School. I was bar mitzvahed at Temple Emeth, and I recently celebrated my 50th reunion at Brookline High. So I'm very familiar with the neighborhood, and especially with Temple Emeth. I think Temple Emeth is an interesting issue because this is, going to exacerbate the parking for the high holidays and religious days that Temple Emeth is already eating up in this neighborhood. And I know Mr. Allen has said several times how much bigger Temple Emeth is, but the lot, Temple Emeth sits on a city block. It's a huge facility, it's true. It's also occupies, a complete, block. And I assume probably pre-exists zoning in Brookline. It's been there for, a long time. But in any event, we've touched on, and everybody knows the standards, what we're talking about. The Dover Amendment prohibits reasonable regulations concerning the bulk and height of structures in determining yard sizes, lot areas, setbacks, open space, parking, and building requirements. And the cases all say the purpose is to strike a balance between preventing local discrimination against either educational or religious uses and honoring legitimate municipal concerns that typically are expressed in local zoning, like Brookline has. The burden of proof, I think, has already been said. The challenging and a challenge to zoning restrictions falls on the applicant. They have to prove that compliance with the requirements would substantially diminish or detract from the usefulness of a proposed structure or impair the character of the institution's campus without appreciably advancing the municipality's legitimate concerns. In seeking a balance between municipal concerns and prevention of discrimination, courts have enforced restrictions consistent with promoting public health or safety, preserving the character of a neighborhood, or other purposes served by local zoning. And that's exactly what the neighbors are looking to see happen here. Promote public health, safety, preserving the character of the neighborhood. Now, I know my time is limited, and we've touched on many issues here tonight. But I'll say, and I'm not sure if I have the most recent plan. I'm told that a revised plan was submitted today. That was at least posted today on your website. I only got a chance to look at it on my phone, and I only know that it was revised, dated January 7th, so it's over a month ago. But I haven't had a chance to look at it. But from the zoning schedule that was on the plans that I have reviewed, every single setback is violated in this project. Most of them by at least 100%. As I said, the butters are all one-level story homes. It's going to be towered over by this two-story structure. The zoning key on the plans that I reviewed shows the proposed height is 41.6 feet. Now, I'm not sure if that has changed, but that's more than the 1 foot, I think, that was mentioned earlier over the 35 that's required under your bylaw. And of course, the FAR is the elephant in the room. That's the big number that really shows, the extreme density of this project. I understand, and I'm not as facile in, Brookline's bylaw, but the relief being sought is under section 5.08, which permits, as a special permit in for religious use for this board to modify the dimensional requirements in Article 5. But that is subject to the extent necessary to allow reasonable development of such a use in general harmony with other uses permitted and as regulated in the vicinity. So it's not as I think the applicant would make you believe, the Dover Amendment is not a free get out of jail card saying we can do whatever we want because we're a religious institution. That's not true. This board in the town has the authority to impose reasonable regulations. And the bulk of this building overlooking one-story houses The house that borders it on Grove Street, the windows face into the 2 bedrooms of that house. What could be more imposing than that? The fact that on traffic, I think you can get into and regulate traffic. I think it's perfectly appropriate for you to order a traffic study, especially as the applicant has said, there's another use 1/10 of a mile away, which is going to be exacerbating traffic and parking on the same days that they will be doing it. So I think it's certainly relevant to know how much is going to be spilling over from Temple Limit, which is 1/10 of a mile away, who's the same days, as I said, the high holidays, the Sabbaths, and the like, are going to be also eating up all the parking in this neighborhood. I can tell you, the temple I belong to, what they do on high holidays is they have no parking in all the adjacent streets, and they bus all the congregants in from they use an elementary school that's about a half a mile away for congregants to park, and they bus them there to alleviate the parking and congestion, which is going to be on this residential neighborhood. I've also heard a lot of promises today, and the question is, how are they going to be enforced? For instance, it was stated that they would never use this facility for any other use other than their own. That was very nice. I believe them. I think that's, I have no reason to think was disingenuous. However, how is that going to be enforced? Is that going to be a condition in your permit? What happens if they change their mind in the future? How are you going to, enforce that? And, things change, as I think you said, Madam Chairwoman, it was build it and they will come. The current use of the current Shabbat is certainly doesn't warrant the size of this building. There's 120 seats in the sanctuary. From what I heard, is the maximum they're getting now is about 100. Plus, there's other rooms that could be used in the to hold other congregants. There's numerous classrooms. They don't have the demand right now for the facility that they're building, and that they're just it's a hope, a wing, and a prayer that in future years they are going to. So how is this board, how is the town going to regulate in the future if uses change and they decide they have to do something to either generate income, since, as it was stated, they don't have all their income is just through fundraising. So I think that's important for the board to consider of how they're going to make sure that all these promises are met. I think stormwater drainage, typically in a petition like this, there's a whole scope of submittals that an applicant will make. There'll be a traffic study, there'll be some civil engineering, there'll be a drainage study. I mean, the impervious surface alone. Where's the drainage going? I don't see, the only place I can see it going is onto the abutters properties. So how is that going to be regulated? I mean, it's a really, I think that the submittal is wholly inadequate for this board to even adequately, judge what's going to happen. And I think it's entirely appropriate for the board to require a traffic study to see what the level of service is, to see what impact Temple Emmett has on the same days that they want to use street parking. And certainly there should be some civil engineering to see where the water runoff is going. So, I mean, I know there's a lot of people behind me, but I think, there's been a promise of a lighting plan, a landscape plan, there's been a lot of promises, but where's the enforcement mechanism? Who's going to be looking at it? I think that's appropriate. That's what your board is supposed to do. You should be looking at the landscape plan. You should be looking at the lighting plan. The neighbors should have an opportunity to look at them, to comment on them in connection with your deliberation. So With that said, unless you have any questions, I'd like to reserve the right at the end to maybe sum up, but I know it's 9 o'clock already, and there's many people who want to talk and will tell you the personal impacts that the density of this project is going to have upon them.
Thank you, Councillor.
Peter, did you want to say anything, or do you want me to move to the next speaker?
I'm sorry, who are you
Sorry.
asking? Peter? I'm sorry.
I didn't know if he had mentioned he wanted to
Reserve to
say.
the end. If
Yeah.
the board would permit, I'll reserve to the end. Thank you so much.
Okay, so next we have Sarah Hannaford.
Hi, it
This is
won't
about
let me
our
share
neighbor.
my video.
Kathleen Mann, please
About
mute.
that building down the road, expected.
Kathleen Mann, please mute your microphone.
Sure, this is me. Okay, yeah.
Sorry, I'm not able to share my I'm not able to share video.
Okay, we
That's
can hear you.
quite all right. Could
Oh,
you just
okay.
give us your name and address for the record and
Okay.
provide your comments? And Nicole, if you could start the timer, please.
Okay, no problem. My name is Sarah Rohanifard. I live at 80 Bellingham Road with my husband and young kids. I know that you've seen the 3D renderings and the shadow study, but when you look at the property, my house is directly to the left. It's a ranch home, 1,751 square feet, and incredibly close to the building. I want to paint a picture of what's happening at my bedroom window. The current single family home is very close to my home, but the bedroom window is facing a garage on a single family home. In the new building, my bedroom window will be directly in line with giant windows for children's classrooms. I'm already worried about the day that I forget to close my windows after a shower and a bunch of kids are staring at me. My house is so small, but it feels bigger because we get so much light through the windows. Tall trees will give some privacy, but if they're too tall, then they would block the light. The effect of a building covering such a huge chunk of the property from our side is essentially a white wall with huge windows directly facing our bedroom windows. Fixing the Bellingham Road setback would help, but we need a better solution for the windows. Classrooms, particularly religious ones, should not be looking into my bedroom. Another issue is trash. When I look outside my bedroom window, I'll see children facing me in a classroom, and below that, I'll see a trash dumpster directly below me because the parking is right below the bedroom window. With a building this size and the number of people expected to attend, the trash will be significant, and the smell will literally come into my bedroom. And sound has been a huge stressor for me. Our neighborhood is so quiet that I can hear a single car on Grove Street. And this building is huge with tall ceilings, lots of bathrooms, industrial kitchen, and an indoor pool. The HVAC is going to be substantial and nobody's talking about it. The architect said in the planning meeting that they just haven't gotten to it. And this is so stressful. It's totally unfair. We're people living here. And finally, the entrance to our driveway is just a few feet from the entrance to the building. My husband and I both work. We have 2 young kids. Mornings are chaotic, and trying to get the kids out the door on time, we're worried that the cars are going to be blocking us in. Anyway, I guess I'll stop, but thank you for your time. I hope that you had a chance to stand in our house and see that this is really going to have an impact on your life and that you reject the proposal and ask for substantial changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Kathleen Mann, followed by Jonathan Spector.
Hi there. This is Kathleen Mann. Thanks so much. I really appreciate all of the incredible work that's gone in before this. I was listening to all of the comments that were made earlier and by Mr. Allen. He's saying that, and also the rabbi, that for some of the big events, there may be 200 people that are attending, 70% of whom are driving. So assuming they're right, that's groovy. That's about 140 people driving. And let's say you divide that by 3 people in a family, that's 46 cars. But if they're wrong by 20%, it could be 168 people. That means 56 cars in a neighborhood that is such a small neighborhood. That's a very small road. This is a very densely populated area. And you probably are aware because you you exist right now over at Bellingham at a bigger road across from Temple Emeth. But the road that is Grove Street is incredibly crowded. It's incredibly crowded in the mornings and the evenings, and we're not evenings, from 2 to 7, from 6:30 to 9 in the morning. There's just a lot of activity happening. And so while this event sounds great, this idea sounds great, I agree with what Mr. Levy said. It seems like a wonderful idea in the wrong location.
Jonathan Spector.
Thank you, Ms. Mann.
Thank you.
Nicole, are you able to re-enable our video? I think you turned them off before. There we go. I should be on now. Okay, I'm good to start. Hi, my name is John Spector, and I live on Bellingham Drive. As a member of the Brookline Jewish community, I respect the importance for Chabad of building their new home. However, the project is obviously too big, and the unmitigated impacts on our neighborhood would be unbearable. In trying to justify the proposal and exempt it from many applicable zoning regulations, Chabad has relied on 3 assertions that are all false. Number 1, Jeffrey said a few times that the planning board supported the project. I'm now quoting the public record with member Mark Zarillo, who said, quote, "I understand that the use is allowed, but the use here is in this neighborhood, and it really doesn't reflect generous setbacks or reasonable size. I'll say the building is too big, it should have more setbacks, and I would like to have justification for the program." Other board members expressed similar sentiments, but decided it was the ZBA's role to assess those issues and not theirs. Number 2, they claimed in their letter that the town has no legitimate municipal purpose in regulating the project. That ignores hundreds of town residents that have asked the town to enforce its rules, the town's interest in safety, and the many very real issues substantiated by experts that you've heard from the neighbors. Number 3, they claim they've already compromised sufficiently and that removing a single foot of their 23,000 would somehow make the remaining 22,999 feet unfit for their use. That's impossible on its surface, and they're proposing 9 different offices, flex, and future use spaces, and a bathroom for every single classroom. Their project is 3 times larger than the legal limit. Their revisions to date represent less than a 10% reduction. If you're going 150 down Route 9, slowing to 140 doesn't count as addressing the needs of other drivers, and it certainly doesn't make you compliant with the town's reasonable speed limits. Comparatively small revisions that have nothing to do with the intended use would significantly improve this project for our neighborhood. There is a compromise here where they can build what they need to without destroying our neighborhood. We won't be happy about it, but we can at least live with it. They've rebuffed our requests to discuss a compromise, though, and they will only engage with us once the board makes it clear their proposal is unacceptable. I urge you to do so tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Spector.
Next up, we have Miriam Barshak.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to emphasize concerns about the impact that this project will have on local traffic, which has already been raised, and the impact that that traffic will have on our daily lives and safety as residents of the neighborhood. My husband and I have lived at 25 Bellingham Drive for the past 17 years. We have a 14-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. Our morning routine involves ensuring our children can get to school safely. Our daughter is a 9th grader at Brookline High School. She rides the bus to school in the morning. In order to catch the school bus, which arrives around 7:45 in the morning, she must walk past the properties at 90 and 100 Bellingham Road and then cross Grove Street to wait on the opposite corner. Of all of the stressors and challenges related to her transition to high school, this is the one we have worried about the most. Due to busy morning traffic and despite using the crosswalk on a typical weekday morning, this is already a treacherous undertaking that relies on the goodwill of drivers to stop from both directions. With a new large building at this corner, leading to both decreased visibility and increased traffic associated with the center's activities, this intersection will be more hazardous not only for our daughter, but also for other pedestrians, including those of all ages who may be accessing the center itself on foot. Our evening routine involves picking up our son from the extended day program at the Edith C. Baker School by 6 p.m. We're often arriving within a few minutes of 6 p.m. due to local traffic congestion, which has been highlighted already by one of the other neighbors, including at times traffic backup related to local motor vehicle crashes that will also be mentioned by others. It would be regrettable to overlook safety concerns by allowing a project to both generate more traffic and obstruct the visibility in an area that's already dangerous for both drivers and pedestrians. We look to the ZBA to protect public safety by regulating the size, height, and setbacks for this building. Thank you.
Next, we have Pam Siddell.
My name is Pam Seidel. I live at 21 Bellingham Drive, and I'm a direct abutter in the rear of the property. I, like many others, think the building is too massive and not reasonable for the site. Tonight, I want to focus on the proposed placement of a playground within the setback, directly next to my backyard, and about 28 feet from a bedroom, office, and dining room. The close proximity of this playground to my property will have significant negative impacts on my ability to enjoy both the inside of my home and my outdoor spaces. I bought this home on a cul-de-sac 12 years ago and cherished the peaceful environment inside and out. Unfortunately, with the playground so close to my windows, the sounds of 10 to 30 children shouting and laughing will echo throughout the house, even with the windows closed. The noise will make it difficult for me to concentrate or make phone calls. If children were outside right now in the playground, you would be able to hear them in this meeting. I have created a tranquil private space in my backyard with professional landscaping and a place to entertain guests. The loud sounds of children and playground equipment will make it difficult to enjoy simple pleasures like having a cup of coffee in the morning on my deck. Having a playground open 10 hours a day will create a sense of being on display where I can no longer fully relax or enjoy time outside without interruption. On Jewish holidays, when the playground will be open later in the evening, and I am celebrating the Jewish holidays at home with my family and friends, my guests will be forced to contend with this constant noise, detracting from what should be a relaxing and private time. I highly recommend the playground be eliminated or relocated away from abutters, or at the very least, I'm asking the ZBA to require Chabad to use solid high fencing and soundproofing materials to minimize noise disruption and privacy concerns. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Barsha.
Thank you. I'm Jason Bashek. My wife Miriam just spoke. We're both from 25 Bellingham Drive. Religious discrimination statutes ensure that a religious entity is not treated in an inferior manner during the zoning process. But these statutes are not a sword that an entity may use to obliterate the zoning process. If referencing Dover ended the zoning story, then why does the Dover Amendment statute say that you can reasonably regulate religious purposes concerning bulk, height of structures, setbacks, and other considerations? If reciting Dover was sufficient, why does the Tough College case that one of the attorneys referenced state that zoning requirements which serve legitimate municipal purposes, such as promoting public health or safety, preserving the character of an adjacent neighborhood, may be permissibly enforced consistent with Dover? RLUIPA was mentioned, but if RLUIPA recitation was sufficient to derail zoning review, why did the Department of Justice statement on RLUIPA say that RLUIPA is not a blanket exemption from zoning laws, and that as a general matter, religious institutions must follow the same requirements and go through the same land use processes as other land users? We're only asking the ZBA address the traffic-related safety concerns and radical alteration of the character of the neighborhood that would be created by the proposed building on the corner of Grove and Bellingham Road in a residential area near a busy intersection in the same way that it would any other proposed large building at a corner in a residential intersection. And if RLUIPA or Dover allowed an entity to merely recite it in lieu of demonstrating actual need for the proposed building, why does the Department of Justice regarding RLUIPA talk about the actual religious needs of an individual or religious congregation? We only ask that the ZBA hold this proponent to the same level of scrutiny and review and demonstration that it would of any other applicant before it,
such as demonstrating why, for example, a 0.5 or 0.55, etc., FAR would not be sufficient for its use. Thank you very much.
Many Wanunu.
Hello. So my video is not working. That can be. I'll just start without video for the sake of time. Hi, I'm Manny Wilunu. I'm a resident of 80 Bellingham Road, which is directly to west of the proposed property. I teach and run a research lab at Northeastern University, so I'm, work close by. I'm not sure where to begin. I'll start by saying that this process has taken a toll all out in our well-being because of the magnitude of the structure that's very much next to our house. You heard from my wife earlier about her comments about her privacy and the magnitude of the place. And I'll just say that has been a pretty reserved comment and said a lot of the things that I want to say. Not a night goes by without me thinking to myself that the place that I moved to, this very quiet and serene place, will never be the same again. And I just want to know that I just wanted the ZBA to know that this is not an objection to the use or to religious use. I'm a member of the Jewish faith. I'm not super religious, but I am Jewish, and I do respect the right for everyone to practice their religious practices. But a 23,000 square foot building, and not to mention, this is square feet, for that's an area, right? And then we talk about volume, multiply that by the height. That makes it a very large volume. And when you look at some of the renderings that will be presented soon by one of our neighborhood members, you'll see that volume actually is monstrous compared to most of the homes nearby, which are 1,500 to 2,500 square feet. So I'd like to say that I'd like the zoning board to consider use and reason in a set, not use, but reason in that sense, because what's reasonable is, it's arbitrary, right? I mean, if there's 1,000 congregation members that need to practice their religion, does that mean that you would build here a 6-story 100,000 square foot home? Or where is the limit to reason is what I'm asking, and that is, I think, up to the ZBA to exercise their judgment, and I'd like you to do so to the best of your power. Thank you.
Francis Walensky.
Hi, my name is Francis Walensky. I'm at 6 Bellingham Drive. I would like to share a video provided by an architect that did a shadow study. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yes, you can share.
Okay. It will cause you to stop screen sharing. Is that all right?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
You will be still limited to 2 minutes, though. I'll start your timer when you're ready with the.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I apologize, I'm unable to make the schedule.
If you're not the one speaking, please mute your screen. We can hear some echoing.
And I work full-time as a designer in Boston. And I'm here on behalf of the community to express serious concerns about the proposed building and its negative impact on the residential neighborhood. Specifically, I'd like to address 3 key issues: the negative shadow impact, poor programming, and inefficient massing design language. Starting off with the shadow impact, this large-scale facility's massing is incompatible with the neighborhood's scale and character. As you can see from these diagrams, there is significant impact surrounding the homes during all 4 seasons. The resulting shadows will significantly reduce sunlight for nearby homes, gardens, and public spaces. This will negatively affect the quality of life for the resident, particularly during the colder months when natural light is crucial for both comfort and energy efficiency. Secondly, the building programming is not yet efficient. There is a major parking issue that needs to be addressed. The building is currently designed to easily hold up to 500 plus people. On average, it can be expected to hold at least 200 people twice a week. My question is, where are they expected to park? The building may be protected under the Dover Amendment, but the insufficient parking will create safety hazards, traffic congestions, and other community harms. It seems that the current solution is to just have the cars take up all of Bellingham Road and we can all agree that that is not an effective long-term solution. Lastly, the design is completely out of step with the existing architectural fabric of the neighborhood. The proposed structure's excessive height, bulk, inefficient setbacks, and lack of landscaping disregards the area's unique charm and character. A design that prioritizes function over thoughtful integration will not only devalue the nearby properties, but it'll also disrupt the cohesive and welcoming nature of the community. To summarize, the proposed building is incompatible with this neighborhood due to its shadow impact, poor programming, and inappropriate design. I urge the board to reject this project in its current form and instead work with the developers to pursue a plan that meets and respects the needs and character of the community. Thank you for your time, and I hope you take my analysis into careful consideration.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Sarah Shao.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm a resident of 6 Bellingham Drive, and I live here with my husband and 2 young children, age 8 and 10. First of all, I want to just say that I reiterate everybody who has mentioned this before, which today's topic is not to talk about whether this is about a religion. It's simply about a matter of use of the land that is inappropriate for a highly residential neighborhood. Well, Mr. Simpson, the town council, has mentioned that Brookline is an urban community, but I do want to quote the Brookline town webpage, which is Brookline is a heavily suburban area with urban characteristics. And yet I'm sure everybody who knows North Brookline and South Brookline vary dramatically in terms of characteristic and the people who lives here. One thing I do want to point out is that Mr. Allen, there's several inconsistencies, but one thing he talked about how the outside space when during the announcement of this project was so loud, it was inappropriate use because it was running out of space. Well, it was because that day was thundering. Everybody walked in the rain to attend this meeting, and everybody tried to speak up. And Mr. Allen told us because they have the Dover Amendment, it doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter about opinion. But I want to urge everyone to think, driving limit is 35 miles per hour, but yet everybody drives 40. There's a matter of the letter of the law and intent of the law. And I urge everyone to think about what is your definition for reasonable. If you have small children running, walking into school on the street, and you have elderly parents who take their daily strolls along this quiet neighborhood, what is your definition for reasonable setback? What is the reasonable? Chabad has talked about being the neighbor, yet not once has the Chabad reached out to the neighborhood. Every time the setback was done through the lawyer. Thank you very much. I know my time's up. I'm sorry if I seem emotional. This has just been very upsetting as a neighbor, as a human. Thank you very much.
Next we have Diane Aberthan.
Okay, my video is not working, so I will just speak. My name is Diane Aberzenskis, and I have lived at 59 Bellingham Road for over 24 years. I would like to relay the results of an online petition which was launched on December 16th after the town planning board left unaddressed so many concerns of the neighborhood. The Bellingham and Grove Street neighborhoods respectfully requested that the Brookline Zoning Board apply reasonable regulations to the proposed development to ensure it is designed thoughtfully and preserves the livability of our neighborhood. The architectural plans submitted by the Chabad of Chestnut Hill were shown on the online petition. The petition stated that residents are not opposed to a building being constructed and recognize its value to the Chabad community, but we feel that the project review process has left critical issues unaddressed. To quote Select Board Chair Bernard Green in our petition, quote, "This project must conform with the reasonable requirements of the community," unquote. Examples of the reasonable issues important to the neighborhood include privacy impacts, groundwater and environmental concerns, HVAC, lighting and noise pollution, traffic and parking issues, and the need for a traffic study. We asked that only Brookline residents sign the petition. To date, the petition has been signed by 361 people. 354 signers did so in the first month. 300 or 83% of the signers were from Massachusetts, and 60% of the overall signers were from the 3 zip codes in Brookline. 72% of the signers from Massachusetts were from Brookline, Chestnut Hill, Boston, and Newton. The remaining 17% of the signers were from outside of Massachusetts, from 22 states, and 1 from the UK. The community of people who support the Zoning Board of Appeals applying reasonable regulations to this project is much larger than the immediate group of residents on this call. This petition was signed by 361 people, 217 from Brookline alone, who live in this area and know it well, travel through this area, or who are connected to this area, and who will be significantly impacted by your decision. Thank you.
Gregory Kamenetsky. Gregory, are you there?
I'm sorry.
We can hear you.
I cannot turn on my video, but okay. My name is Gregory Kamenetsky. I have lived with my wife, Dr. Elena Kamenetsky, on 15 Bellingham Drive for 42 years. For 42 years, we enjoyed our house and the quiet and safe environment. Here we brought up our grandchildren. Here, Elena taught them to ride bicycle. As a Holocaust survivor and a refugee from my country of birth because of anti-Semitism, I sympathize with Chabad building their new home. Unfortunately, the building lot they have is too small and is in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Chabad should scale down the project and take into the account the harm and inconvenience to the abutters and residents. I was surprised tonight by the distance that was shown from the children's playground to our bedroom and deck. Probably whoever did, maybe the architect, was using an old plan of the lot, but it doesn't take into account that our house is actually larger. We added a bedroom and decks in 1990. So our bedroom and the decks are approximately 40 feet from the lot line. You have a picture of my house showing the bedroom window and deck as seen from the behind the lot line. I had an opportunity to learn what a racket just a dozen children make playing together when I passed the preschool at Temple Amos. We are retired and spend most of the day at home. We read book inside or on the deck. We nap in the bedroom or in the deck. I consider this to be our right. With this noise level, we could not do this anymore. The fence would not help reduce noise. We request Chabad find a different location for the playground. One possibility is the corner of Grove Street and Bellingham Road. We expect ZBA to protect our rights and rights of our neighbors.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, Linda Thompson.
У меня времени мало. Ты делать начинаешь говорить, что у меня время истекло.
Нет.
Sorry. Hi. My name is Linda Thompson, and I live at 121 Grove Street, and I am a direct abutter. I have lived here for 46 years. My parents bought this home in 1978. We moved from a two-family in West Roxbury, and one of the things we liked most was that the backyard and had such a suburban feel, not an urban feel. So many trees and open space. We had the same neighbors at 90 and 100 Bellingham for the entire 46 years. Grove Street has always been a busy street. Of course, the traffic has increased tenfold. I have trouble getting in and out of my driveway many times a day. And I've seen many accidents. It's treacherous crossing the street, and I am concerned about the increase in traffic. but I'm very concerned also about the density, the size, and the scope of this building. I share the longest property line of 137 feet. This is the back of the building. This back contains, the back of the building contains a courtyard, many windows, some floor to ceiling, and walkways. I'm concerned about my privacy because this faces my bedrooms, my backyard, my enclosed porch, and my deck. I feel that I will have to keep my shades down all the time and that I won't be able to use my yard in privacy like I have. And to compound this, I am down gradient from the building, so it makes it more imposing and more massive. I would hope that the footprint would be made smaller and also to consider being down gradient that I might have problems with water and water coming into my basement. I do have pooling in the yard when it's after a heavy rain, so it's a great possibility after having so much impervious surface and removing all these trees that we have enjoyed that this could happen. I hope that you consider making some changes. Thank you very much.
Horace Albert.
Okay, hi. I live with my family at 60 Bellingham Road, and we lived here for 10 years, and it's been peaceful, quiet, and good. We've gotten to know our neighbors and their children, and we've enjoyed watching them grow and change. Never did I imagine that a development of this size would come to our road. Never in a million years would I have imagined it. We left Brookline Village because we wanted to get away from the noisy, busy anonymity of North Brookline, but we wanted to stay in Brookline. So we were really very lucky to find this quiet little quiet street in South Brookline that really is kind of magically tucked away in a very busy triangle. But here it's quiet enough, it's been quiet enough for kids to play in the street and for families to congregate and gather there. I knew by the size and scope of the architect's drawings that the new building would be able to hold more than 400 people, and the classrooms would be able to accommodate over 60 children and teens all at one time. This would mean then that scores of people would soon be driving in and out of our street, parking up and down on both sides of the road. There's no space for on-site parking on a lot now that is going to be completely covered by building or blacktop. No space even for a proper drop-off and pick-up circle for the young students in their schools. To further complicate the traffic matter, there is a blind S-curve on Bellingham Road. I and a few other residents live on that curve, and I've already experienced a few close calls. An increase in traffic will inevitably increase the dangers and the risks for all, and particularly for us on that S-curve. This building is going to be very big, and it is squeezed onto a residential lot in a residentially zoned neighborhood. I know we've mentioned that, but I just have to mention it again. It will overwhelm our neighborhood and my family directly. The quiet tranquility will be lost that we have all enjoyed here, to the dangers and frustrations of a huge increase in traffic flow, out of control parking up and down the street, and daily and often nightly noises of all kinds that will inevitably be heard directly by me and the rest of the neighborhood for at least 6 months out of the year when we are all outside and the weather is good. As the board decides what to do about this project, please consider deferring the permits until the size has been reduced to a size that makes more sense for this residential street, until a safe on-site drop-off and pickup circle can be incorporated into the plan, and until there has been time for proper noise and traffic studies. The well-being and safety of my family and the neighborhood as a whole depends on it. Please consider our losses and our rights as individuals and as a neighborhood as seriously as you must consider the applicant's privileges and plans. Thank you.
Ray Chung.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name's Ray Chung, and I've lived at Bellingham Road, 59 Bellingham, for over 24 years. And I'm across the street from one of the abutters. My concerns as a non-abutter revolve around traffic and water. The traffic impact for this project poses safety concerns that have been articulated by others, but must be addressed and are covered by the town's zoning bylaws. There needs to be a traffic study done in order to understand how traffic will be affected by this building. A review of public records has shown that there's a higher traffic accident rate in the vicinity of Bellingham and Grove. Even before ground is broken, there have been 2 accidents just in the last 10 days at or near the corner of Bellingham and Grove Streets. In fact, a car from the accident on January 28th crashed right into the fence at 100 Bellingham and destroyed it. The construction of a large building with narrow setbacks and minimal on-site parking poses a legitimate safety hazard to the neighborhood. Traffic and parking pose the risk of blocking entry and egress of neighbors from their driveways. Backups from drop-off spilling over into Grove Street further pose a hazard to incoming traffic and to neighborhood pedestrians. This traffic safety issue will affect me as well as all of the residents in the area, and the project should be denied in its current state or deferred pending further study. And we would simply ask that the results of such a traffic study lead to mitigation of traffic and safety issues, not a limitation of religious use per se. As far as water is concerned, the building's extremely large footprint creates concerns about groundwater, drainage, and potential flooding. Assessments are needed to ensure local water systems and nearby properties are not adversely affected. Combining the extremely large FAR with the planned removal of over 70 large trees, this project prioritizes maximum building size over minor revisions to address environmental impact and natural buffers. And as been previously stated, an aquifer lies below Bellingham Road. And as someone who suffered through the flood of the century in 2010, I can speak personally to the nightmare of having the water table rise into one's home as it did ours and other homes. So based on these plans, there will be a potential harm to many of us in the neighborhood, and an environmental impact study is needed to ensure that it is both safe and reasonable to build a large building that drastically changes the landscape in this area. Thank you for your consideration.
Next up, we have Joya Mukherjee.
Start my video. Can I start my video? It says the host has stopped your video.
One moment. You should be able to start video now.
Thank you. My name is Joya Mukherjee. I live at 77 Bellingham Road with my 18-year-old and my 92-year-old mother. We have lived in this house as a 3-generation family since 2013. When I first moved into our home, which we love very, very much, we noticed a lot of water in the basement. We were told by a professional contractor that Bellingham Road lies over 2 different aquifers. If I can share my screen, I can show a picture of the, if you can enable me to share my screen, I can show a picture of. These underground rivers, yes. These underground rivers cause flooding in multiple basements in our houses. To mitigate this impact, I put in 2 sump pumps and a 24/7 dehumidifier. And with that, I am often able, but not always, to keep my basement dry. Secondly, my house is built on ledge, which many houses, as a direct abutter to this property, many houses will also be affected if the ledge is disturbed. My house is on ledge on stilts. And so here is the aquifer that runs across. There's one here and there's one here directly in the area of the proposed construction. While we understand that the zoning board does not have the mandate to look at the stormwater, we believe that a building of this size must be properly studied before it is accepted for the zoning, because there are multiple scientific studies that show that the bulk, the density, and the height of a building can significantly affect stormwater. So before approving the zoning of this building, we really would recommend and strongly hope that there would be a hydrology study and a study of what the blast will do to the ledge on which many of our houses are built. So Also, we would just say that we have not had anyone from the Chabad reach out to us to discuss this with us. They have only communicated through the lawyer and made one offer about the roof deck, which we said we would rather negotiate with the people from Chabad, and that has not happened. So we have little faith that if these things aren't done before the construction starts, they will never happen. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Jerry Selvin.
Hi, my name is Jerry Selvin. I'm at 60 Bellingham Road. I'm Iris Alpert husband. We, as Iris mentioned, 10 years ago, we came here from Brookline Village, and we found what we had considered was the perfect location for us to move. And in order to make this happen, I had to make a personal sacrifice, and I was willing to do it because it was worth it. I deferred my retirement. I was 68 years old the day we moved in 10 years ago. And I know I don't look it, but I'm 78 now. So, just kidding. So, but during that time, I had to make a decision. Well, how long am I going to work? So I worked an extra 5 years. And during that time, I would say this is absolutely worth it because I love the neighborhood. I love my neighbors. I am not one to really share much with my neighbors in my past lives, but everybody on this street, everybody on Bellingham Drive, going all the way to Grove Street, all the way up practically to South Street. We know everybody knows each other. Everybody reacts with each other. And I'm thinking, I'm Jewish. I've been to Chabad, but my goodness, this large building so out of character with this neighborhood is going to change the entire street. And so now what? And it really has a profound emotional impact, not only on me, but on everybody who has spoken here, as you could tell. So I really hope that Chabad will reconsider the incredibly large facility that they're going to put on an incredibly residential street. So thank you very much.
Next, we have Albert Grandy. Mr. Grandy, would you still like to speak? Okay, I'm going to move to the next speaker on the list, Joe Smith. Okay, no response from Joe Smith. Paige Lucas.
Hello. Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm Paige Lucas. I live at 34 Bellingham Road. I just had a couple of points I wanted to make briefly. The first, I just want to touch on Young Israel on Green Street. I used to live right there in Coolidge Corner, a couple of blocks away, and I know that was approved a long time ago by different ZBA members. And that building is quite large, but just I don't really think the location bears much comparison. It is 2 blocks from Coolidge Corner. It is right by T-stops, as was previously mentioned. Many of the congregants probably walk instead of drive. So the impact on that neighborhood is different. And also, it's just on a street where there's apartment buildings that are 4 stories tall and many units wide. And so there's many commercial businesses on the end of Green Street where it hits into Coolidge Corner. So I don't really know if that, as a comparison, really makes a lot of sense in this context. And just personally for me, my husband and I moved here to Bellingham Road 1 year ago. This is our first home, and I'm actually due a week from Saturday to give birth to our first child. So, yeah, we moved here with the intention to raise a family because of all the reasons everyone said that a neighborhood is so lovely. And I just want to touch again on the traffic concern. I already feel personally unsafe, especially being pregnant, crossing Grove Street and with the accidents that have been happening, the traffic there, and just the thought of increased cars and less visibility at that corner of Bellingham Road and Grove Street. I'm really concerned picturing myself with a stroller and trying to cross the road and go walk in Walnut Hill Cemetery, where we love to go spend time. And I think, the cars, it's just going to shrink the visibility on the street. And also just to note, for our property, we have a driveway that's very skinny, and I'm very concerned about being blocked in and not able to get out of my driveway. Thank you.
Next, we have Alina Corrigan.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your time today. So for all of us neighbors, the past couple of months have been a nightmare as we grapple with this unexpected development. So one that will have an irreversible impact on our community and our lives for as long as we choose to call this place home. A new massive 23,000 square foot non-residential building on a quiet suburban street is not just a bad idea, it's a fundamental failure of modern urban planning. A well-governed town prioritizes safety, thoughtful decision-making, and fairness of all its residents. If this project were planned for a large, well-suited lot with ample space for parking and sound control, we might have been having a different conversation, but it's not. And yet somehow, every prior Brookline body has ignored the facts, dismissed our concerns, and waved this project through. What you decide today will set a precedent. If this massive out-of-phase project is approved, other institutions, religious and secular, will use this decision to push for similarly outsized developments. We've seen responsible decision-making before. In 2013, Brookline required a Mormon church on Route 9 to build underground parking because their lot was too small, so they had to find a more suitable location in Belmont. That was a fair, logical decision. For 20 years, this congregation has operated perfectly well from a 3,500 square foot residential house. Now they're requesting a space 7 times that size. Why? A few additional programs, a speculative increase in attendance? The fact is, Brookline has been increasingly diverse over the years. We've all seen new local religious holidays from various faiths added to the Brookline school calendar, like Diwali, Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha, and Lunar New Year, reflecting this diversity. Yet, there is no data to support the claim that this institution is on the verge of massive growth. The increased diversity, paired with their modest congregation of 100 people, as the rabbi just mentioned, do not justify the need for a 23,000 square foot building that is more suitable for 2,000 plus people. A responsible and fair solution would be approve a reasonable expansion, maybe 8,000 square feet, not 23,000, and for them to ask for an extension in the future when real facts, the size of their congregation really doubles, triples, or quadruples in size. Require a parking solution that respects the neighborhood, conduct a comprehensive traffic study, and make safety adjustments accordingly. We live in a town known for its highly educated and thoughtful residents, and Brookline has always been a town that values smart planning and community well-being, some of the reasons why so many of us desire to call this place home. We look forward to you to make a decision that reflects that, not just for today, but for the precedents, and will set the future. Please, we beg you to not take this decision lightly. What you approve today could open the door for the next institutional mega building to be right next door to any one of you here on the call, honorable board members, as well as everyone on the call, including the esteemed rabbi and his congregation members. Thank you.
Next, we have Jocelyn Murphy.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jocelyn Murphy, and I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 16. And as a neighbor of Bellingham Road on Baker Circle, I stand with my neighbors in opposing the construction of a monolith on their sleepy residential street that for more than half a century has been a safe haven for the families and children residing on the street. As Mr. Allen and Mr. Simpson have pointed out, the Dover Amendment permits the application of reasonable regulations related to setbacks, height, density, and open space. And I respectfully suggest that a 25,000 square foot linear building fully occupying both lots at 90 and 100 Bellingham Road is unreasonable. In particular, where the applicant has failed to present any credible evidence that application of the relevant zoning regulations would substantially diminish the applicant's use of the property. For example, could multi-use rooms be designed for multiple purposes instead of providing spaces dedicated to a single use? As Chair Schneider has said, the density of the proposed building stands out as a significant issue in this case, and regardless of the size of the Chabad's congregation, the applicant has repeatedly represented in earlier materials that they expect to grow the congregation substantially, which of course would contribute to the traffic and parking issues that have been raised. Mr. Allen's comparison to other religious buildings in Brookline in this case is inapt. For example, the nearby Temple Emeth occupies its own block, and the nearest abutters are not on contiguous lots, but located at least 25 to 30 feet across the street. I respectfully encourage the board to apply the restrictions authorized under the Dover Amendment to the greatest extent permitted by law. Thank you.
Next, we have Farhana Jan.
Thank you. I do have a few more personal anecdotes to add and agree with everything my neighbors have said. I've been a resident of Bellingham Road on number 22 for the past 10 years. And I do want to emphasize that the impact of the proposed building on our street frightens me on so many levels. My daughters are 9 and 11 and they attend the nearby Baker School. I am concerned they cannot safely walk to and from school with the added traffic from the patrons, celebration attendance, and drop-offs that will occur on the corner of an already congested street. I have to point out that there is no traffic light or flashing lights at the crosswalk of Grove and Bellingham, and as my neighbor Ray Chung already stated, there was an accident there just a few weeks ago. Something needs to happen to preserve the safety of my children. During my 10 years, there have also been numerous accidents on the corner of South Street and West Roxbury Parkway, which is the only other available intersection for my daughters to cross to school. Furthermore, we have driven my children to BEEP at nearby Temple Emeth for 4 years, and I can tell you firsthand that we noticed cars were constantly parked illegally and blocked driveways regularly, not to mention the difficulty of navigating drop-off by 8:30 a.m. in this location without dedicated parking. There was no graduated drop-off. Our friends who live on the other side of Bellingham Road, where the current center is, can't play basketball at their home and have parking issues every weekend. We should learn from this and act accordingly. Ours is one of many young families on this street, and we have a lovely community of neighbors who live and play together. A traffic study is a no-brainer for a building of this size in this location. It should be done in good faith. And I've also heard Mr. Allen say many times tonight that this building is nearly compliant with town regulations. I encourage you to require them to be entirely compliant. And I hope that your committee in the town of Brookline can show concern for its neighborhoods and citizens and reject this current proposal. Thank you.
Janice Khan.
Hello, Janice Khan. I'm a town meeting member in precinct 15, where the residents live, and fully support their concerns about the massing of this building in their quiet residential neighborhood, this institutional structure. I have a couple of points to make. One is my neighborhood, I live at on Craftsland Road, is about a block and a half away from Wegmans. And so I can tell you that noise and light are an issue. I'm glad to hear that there is a lighting plan that's being prepared, I suppose. But also the noise impacts from the HVAC systems are considerable. And we do have a general noise bylaw. So I'm encouraged that we are actually imposing general bylaws on this proposal. The other point I want you to make is that educational institutions are also covered by Dover, and that includes our own public schools and private schools who are in Brookline. And yet the town's transportation board approves parking plans for teachers who park on these residential streets in a way that limits the number of cars that can park on any one street so as not to overburden a neighborhood. So we certainly do have precedent for putting together a parking plan. And I'd also like, the final point I'd like to make is that the Chabad in Newton seems to have been much more cooperative or caring about being cooperative with the neighborhood, that they chose to buy a residential house in a residential neighborhood. It's 1/3 the size of what's being proposed here, and yet they arranged to have their school drop-off and pickups at times that did not conflict with the public school that is nearby. They also arranged for off-site parking on high holy days, and they also have a community committee that was set up with members of the Chabad, the school, and even a elected representative from Newton counselor, to work together on any issues that might arise from the operation of their much, much smaller Chabad facility in a residential neighborhood. And I really feel that Brookline has fallen short in also encouraging this sort of structure to make sure that the neighbors are adequately heard, that problems are averted, and I also acknowledge really the very articulate eloquence of the neighbors in this neighborhood. So thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Liana Lipton.
Thank you. Will you allow my video to be restarted, please? Thank you. So I'm Leanna Lipton. I live at Bellingham Drive. Thank you so much to the zoning board for your time as I hit the 10 o'clock hour with you all. As I shared with both the rabbi and at a planning board call, I respect the Chabad's right to build a new space. I've participated in Chabad programs as a high school student and thereafter, and very much understand and respect the Chabad's mission. And while I appreciate the revisions to date, I support my neighbors' concerns about reasonable regulation. To those, I just want to add one more item, which is about the camp. Mr. Allen's comment tonight about Camp Gan Israel was the first mention either in meetings, or I don't think we've seen any mention of it in writing. It's currently run offsite at a Jewish day school. And I have close friends who take a bus from Sharon for that camp. So I just want to reiterate Mr. Geller's question in trying to understand what consolidated uses or what uses will be consolidated at this new site, and whether there are plans to move the camp there as well, given that people are coming from out of Brookline to it. If that is the plan, I just respectfully request that the camp be part of these zoning conversations. I do hope we can reach a consensus that meets everyone's needs. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Raymond Corazani.
Thank you. My name is Ramin Khorasani, and I live at 18 Bellingham Road. And I wanted to just share my agreement with all the comments that have been made by neighbors by our neighbors today. I do also want to emphasize one point, and that is the aspirational expansion of the Chabad Center here, something that increases the size of their current footprint by 6 or 7-fold, to presumably meet a future demand 10 to 20 years from now, has a major impact on this community today. So in the balancing act that the ZBA must take is balancing the timing of the impact on all those who are involved and impacted. Thank you very much.
Next, Bob Deroswick.
Hi, thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and thank you all for your thoughtfulness and kind consideration of this project. I'm an attendee at the services at the Chabad, and I want to speak in favor of this project in two particular ways. The first is, I think there have been some mischaracterizations about the size of the community as opposed to the number of attendees on any given Saturday. I believe that the rabbi said that the average attendance on Saturday is 100. The community as a whole is larger, and in fact, on the high holidays, a couple of times a year, the attendance is vastly bigger, let's say twice the size, 3 times the size. I'm one of the people who drives there. I live in Chestnut Hill, and parking is unremarkable, in my opinion, in front of the current site, and there's no reason to believe that parking would be any different in the new site than it currently is. The other thing that I want to just underscore is that I live in Chestnut Hill, and I live on a street with two churches. One is 2 doors down to the right, and one is 3 doors up to the left. Every Sunday, there's cars from the beginning of the street to the end of the street for about 3 hours. There's also a school in one of the churches, and those cars are on the street when people drop off and pick up. And of course, on Christmas and Easter, the street is yet more crowded. It's a quiet residential street. It's also in close proximity, I should say, to the Chestnut Hill School, which also occasionally fills the streets with cars parking. Would I prefer that there not be any cars? I would. But the fact of the matter is, we make do. It's a safe street. It's a quiet street, and it remains so in spite of the fact that these religious institutions need to use the space. I believe that the larger building will give us a place. I should just mention, the building that we're in now is packed. Physically, the space is overflowing on Saturday mornings. And this new building will give us a place to flourish and continue to grow, a space to pray that will be more conducive to the kind of contemplative spirituality and sense of community that we all seek in our religious affiliations. Thank you very much for your time.
Next, we have Dimitri Linka.
Sorry, can you see?
Oh, there. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, perfect. You can see me, right?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My wife is right next to me with a baby, so she might chime in. I'll mention a couple things. I think the impact on the community, I fully, I understand how difficult it is for the abutters. So I can only speak to the bigger community. The bigger community has benefited greatly from Chabad Chestnut Hill. I really, especially during COVID, especially over the years, people have really benefited, both physically, spiritually, in every capacity possible. So I think it's very important to mention that. Somehow, we live on Wallace, and obviously right next to Baker School, and there's a lot of students, a lot of teachers, and we end up, we deal with it, and we see it on a regular basis, when all the. So anyways, so I want to, and then a couple other quick things. We're one of the families that will walk, right? So we're not going to contribute with our car. I hope not, but it's very important that there's a place that our family can go to. And where we're at right now on Bellingham Road down the street, it's coming out of the seams. I mean, like, so many families are coming there, more children. And I would say that it's not, it's there's a much bigger vision here, which I love, and that's giving a safe place for families to congregate, not just to worship, but also a safe place for people to go to, especially during these times. It's, I think, absolutely vital. So I can speak to the demand. There's a lot of demand with the existing families and the children, and we're very, very grateful for the impact that the rabbi and his family has had on the community. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Eric Reuter.
Thank you. See if I can get my face there. Oops, it says it can't detect the camera. I apologize. I've had this problem, but can you hear me?
Yes.
So I too worship at Chabad, and I want to preface my remarks by saying the obvious, and that is I have a great deal of empathy for those who live on the street, Bellingham Road. This is not a question of good motives versus bad motives, or higher values versus lower values. These are values that are all laudable, and at some point we need to strike a balance. And we've heard from a great number of residents, and I respect their views and their concerns. I do want to, however, as a member of the Chabad community, just say something, stepping back a bit. Stepping back from Bellingham Road, stepping back from Butterham Circle, and to simply observe that Chabad is making this application at, I would say, a profound time for the Jewish community in Brookline. And in a broader sense, this is a profound time for every group of Jews who feel a sense of urgency and renewal in gathering to pray and to practice their faith. It's a natural response to a catastrophe that's 16 months and half a world away, and sadly to a hateful backlash against Jews throughout many parts of our country, including, again, sadly, the Boston area. So does this have direct relevance to the application? No, but I think in a broader sense, it does place these questions into context. The Jewish community, I suggest, needs a place where it can grow and expand. I would suggest that it's not just that Chabad needs a new Brookline home. In a different sense, it is Brookline that needs Chabad. A vibrant Chabad, a growing Chabad, an engaged Chabad that brings meaning and purpose to our Jewish community. I have no doubt that Chabad in its new home will not only be the best of neighbors, but will elevate the community of all who live in our town. That I thank you for your time.
Last speaker, Peter Carr.
Thank you so much. And you know, I don't live there. I don't worship there. And the neighbors, the abutters, have had an opportunity to express to you how they feel this will impact them personally. When we talk about balance, the balance is how will this project change the nature of the neighborhood? And all the neighbors ask of you is to assess the reasonable regulation of this project. The neighbors do not object to the use of the property for the purposes that have been expressed. The neighbors do not feel that this project will be different from a use. What they feel is that their privacy, their open space, their quiet enjoyment, the nature of their neighborhood will be impacted. So all they're asking of you as a board is to do what the legislature has permitted you to do, to assess the reasonable regulation of this project. You know, they ask of you to deny the application, to deny the permits or the variances. But at a minimum, let's do the investigations. Let's do the studies. Let's do the analyses that will inform everybody to determine what would be the best use with respect to the neighborhood. That's all. So I appreciate it's late. You have our letters. You have the statements of the neighborhood. You have the statements of the direct impact that this project will have on those that live there. I don't need to reiterate those. I don't need to repeat that. I ask that you consider those, and I appreciate your time. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Nicole, is this our last speaker?
Yes, that was it.
Okay. As Mr. Allen and others who appear before this board regularly are aware, it is the typical practice of this board not to go past 10 p.m. on any particular hearing night, and this night is no exception to that. So I want to thank everyone very much for spending your evening with us and providing us with your thoughts. You've given us a lot to consider and a lot to think about, but we will not be hearing from town staff tonight, nor will we be deliberating tonight, nor will we be making a decision tonight. We are going to be continuing this hearing to another date. Board members, hopefully you have your calendars. Mr. Allen, hopefully you and your team have your calendars so that we can arrive on an agreed date. Mr. Allen, yes, I see you have your hand up, which I appreciate. What's up?
Can I'd like to respond, but I don't have to do it tonight. So
You certainly may respond at our continued hearing.
Thank you. That's all.
I think we
Absolutely
better off coming
lateness
back
of the
fresh.
hour. I have to drive to New Hampshire now, so I'm all for calling it off.
Let's get you out of here. And
Okay.
honestly, I turn into a pumpkin around 8:30 these days. So let's wrap up for the evening. We will hear from Mr. Allen. You will have an opportunity to respond. We will hear from planning and building staff. We may hear additional comments from town council. I do believe that based on what we've heard to date, it is possible that board members, including myself, may ask for some additional information that could be presented at the continued hearing. One thing that, and Nicole and Polly, this is potentially something that I would ask you to look into and provide the board with information about at the next hearing. We did hear one member of the community note that notwithstanding that many of the Brookline public and private schools are also Dover uses, they are under parking plans from the, from the T-board. And I am wondering if that is actually the case and if we can learn a little bit more about that. Mr. Allen, one thing that we have heard, I think from many neighbors, and I think you heard it embedded in questions asked by this board, are concerns about the impacts of parking, particularly on peak use days and nights here. I would ask you to work with your client and consider whether there is anything you would be willing to do, whether it is like other temples in the neighborhood seem to do, which is on high holy days, utilize a satellite parking facility and bus congregants in for events. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I am just suggesting it may be something that is worth giving some thought to in this interim period. And I will ask Jesse and Wadner if they have any other suggestions or requests for additional information that might make the next meeting more productive. Jesse?
I just want to make one point in what you just said. It's a little problematic for us to provide transportation with an Orthodox rabbi.
I will leave it to you, Attorney Allen, to figure out how you might address some of the concerns that you have heard this evening. And if there's anything operational, programmatic, or otherwise that you might see fit to adjust in light of the abundant public comment and concern that we've heard, I would ask you to please consider it.
Will do.
Jesse, do you have any guidance, thoughts, requests before we do a calendar check?
I absolutely have no guidance. I have thoughts, and I think I have requests.
Well, let's limit it to requests because we're not supposed to be deliberating.
Right. So,
okay,
this is partially a question for Mr. Simpson, but dependent on his response, it would dictate what informational requests I would have. Specifically, we've heard that the burden is on the applicant. And I know Mr. Allen has said, well, they need it. This is the massing they need. These are the uses, so forth and so on. I guess my question initially for Mr. Simpson is, what supporting documentation is it reasonable for a ZBA to ask for in support of an applicant's supporting that statement, the need? And then
Well, first
the
and foremost,
secondary
it is
piece, of course, being that application of regulatory or dimensional requirements will not substantially diminish or detract, blah, blah, blah.
you
Basically, Ms. Murphy's point.
so yes, you should feel empowered to ask Attorney Allen or his clients or his architect, the architect, to give you as much as they can to justify what they're doing. It sounded at one point like Mr. Allen even had a fairly substantial breakdown of what each of the various spaces was being used for. You can ask, for example, comparators. Congregations of similar sizes use space of this size. You can and should ask for as much as they're willing to give you. It will though become, and I don't want to obscure the fundamental act that the board is going to have to undertake, which is ultimately there'll come a point where you will have to ask, okay, you've told us this, you've laid out what you believe is necessary. Do we take you at your word, or do we say, like, no, we believe we have evidence to the contrary, of which many of the neighbors have attempted to put before you. So but prior to that point, you should absolutely develop the record as much as you can. And I think that I know from speaking with certain abutters that for example, they have reviewed plans that demonstrated space. There was space on some of the plans that was labeled as, undetermined or to be determined, something like that. If there was anything like that, you could highlight that and ask particular inquiries about it. But even like I said, you can go room by room and say, what's this used for? You have this many classrooms, how many kids per classroom, when are you going to need that sort of thing. You can go fairly deep with what you're doing, and then to the extent they're able to answer, that's like I said, you said at the beginning, Jesse, that's their burden.
Okay, and so then the question becomes, and I think you may have sort of answered it, but how granular can I get in terms of requiring technical support? It's one thing to respond, we need this size room, we need this volume, right? But are there architectural metrics for what is appropriate, what is reasonable? So that's, how granular is it appropriate for a ZBA to get?
You cannot force them to create a standard that does not exist. You are, if you are aware of a standard, or if someone from the public wants to put forth a standard, you can ask them why they don't meet that standard, and you can ask them to explain why. It would certainly bolster their case if they had a standard on hand to demonstrate, for example, that, minimum sizing for a classroom is this, and we're providing the minimum. We can't go any smaller. We'll be below the minimum of what the state recommends for preschools, something like that. But if, for example, they were offering more space than that because they believed it's warranted, could you say, well, how, in terms of granularity, you couldn't force them to have a standard that demonstrated that was the new minimum. They could say, like, at some point they could say, we are giving 35 square feet per kid because we believe that's warranted. And then you're going to have to make a decision based on that, whether regulating past that is reasonable.
And then the next question is, to to what degree do we accept comments about projected growth, anticipated growth, hoped for growth? How does that factor into substantiating size?
I think it becomes a question of reasonableness. I genuinely, I'm not it is reasonable for a congregation to take a positive view of its members, to a positive view of its growth, and an optimistic view of how its membership is going to develop. But there is a limit, and I think unfortunately that is another sort of judgment call on your part. If someone showed up and said, we have a congregation of 20 people, but we're building a house, we want a center that can house 7,000 people because we know we'll get there someday, you could argue that is unreasonable. However, that's not what they're asking for. They have some projections. They've grown substantially over the last several decades. I think it is going to have to be a real question of, you could ask for those numbers. What do you need? What do you project? They gave you a number of some of them today. And if they brought you, if their description of the space builds in a certain allowance for growth, I think that would be reasonable, unless it was way out of hand. I think a congregation is allowed to take an optimistic view of its future.
Okay. So now turning this back to Mr. Allen. So my request would be
loud and clear. Your question.
You got it? You know exactly what I'm going to say?
Your question to Jonathan sort of was your marching orders to me.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct. But Jeffrey, frankly, you sort of are at the nexus of both your information, the rabbi's information, but most importantly, the architect's information, because the architect's the architect makes the recommendations to you of what technically is both appropriate, necessary, achieves the program.
We've got to take the numbers and give them to the architect and say, what's appropriate for 10 kids?
Right. And as you break it down over the entire structure.
I've been thinking about this while you were asking the question. I think,
okay. Great.
I think I know where we have to go.
Great. That's great. That's all I have.
Mr. Allen, just to tag on to that, there were questions that arose during public comment regarding potential operation of a camp on the site.
No. That's not happening.
To the extent that is happening, please do factor.
It's not happening at all.
Okay.
It's not happening at all.
One more question.
The administrative staff for the camp, which is currently in the Chabad, will just the administrators, but no, the camp is going to stay in Newton. It's not coming anywhere near us.
Okay, thank you.
One more question. Would the applicant agree to a condition that none of the uses will ever be available to third parties?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Okay,
but in terms of scheduling, I'm
sorry, Mr. Allen, let me just ask the other board member if he has any other information.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Wadner.
Yes, in your presentation, you mentioned all the other temple that within not too far from the one you proposed. Would it be helpful to present some kind of a graph of a picture showing the vicinity between the current structure you propose in and where they exist, the other one you cited in your presentation where they actually exist in each neighborhood?
Yeah, I could do something like that, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wadner, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay,
What I was gonna say,
while we're doling out homework assignments, Paul Campbell, if you're still on here, would you mind running down the answer to the question about the height that we posed earlier?
Mechanical overrun.
Regarding the mechanical overrun? I think he's frozen.
No, I'm
Nicole,
still here.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
here.
Would
So-
you
Go ahead.
be able to, in between now and the next hearing, please get us an answer to that question?
Absolutely, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Great. All right. Now, in terms of schedule, Jeffrey Allen, you're chomping at the bit to talk about schedule.
only because I want to make sure that I have enough time to answer all of these questions.
Understood, and we want to give you enough time as well. And there are some things that we've asked staff to do. We want to give them time to do it as well. I understand that we have things every Thursday in February. So if we're going to do this later in February, we would need to do this on a Wednesday. But Mr. Allen, it sounds like perhaps, how much time do you think you need, Mr. Allen?
I think let me just look.
And I would just point out, we do have the complication of
thing
school
here.
vacation week, the week of February 17th, and we try to avoid scheduling things that week.
Given that limitation, how about February 26th?
Yes. I just wanted to remind the board that we have a site visit on the 25th and that we have a hearing on the 27th.
And I actually have a hearing for a client on the 26th. So
And I'm on the site, I would be with the ZBA all week that week.
Right.
Oh, you don't want that.
Yeah, it's okay.
Could we do Wednesday, March 7th or Thursday, March 6th?
You said Wednesday, March 5th?
That's Heath and Sheath. We could do the 6th, but that would be 2 nights in a row, but we might not be able to avoid 2 nights in a row.
We might not be able to. Mr. Allen, could you do Thursday the 6th?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Jesse Geller, can you do Thursday the 6th? Jesse Geller.
Rabbi, you okay?
Jesse Geller's looking.
Okay. Wadner, can you do Thursday the 6th?
This is March 6th, right?
Yes, this is March 6th. Thanks, Polly. Good clarification.
I can do the 6th.
Can I just ask, Rabbi, is the 6th okay with you? Okay. I mean, it's not.
Madam Chair, this is Peter Carr. What is on for March 6th, so I know?
We are continuing this meeting to March 6th. We will hear additional information from the applicant that we have requested. We will hear information from staff that we've requested. We'll hear staff reports and the board will deliberate.
Okay, thank you very much. To the extent that counsel for the abutters needs to be there, which I would like to be there, I can be available on March 6th.
I do not think that we will. I think we are highly unlikely to have continued public comment at that point, but certainly council are more than welcome to attend. And if there's an opportunity to participate, we will hear you.
I would like to be available for that so I can at least represent my clients adequately for that hearing, please.
Certainly, you are welcome to attend. Are you saying that March 6th is not a date that works for you, Mr. Carr?
March 6th should work. March 13th would be more beneficial for me, not to hold everybody up. So either way, I prefer the 13th if you can do it.
I cannot.
I can't do it.
Then do the 6th and I'll make myself available at the board's discretion. I just want to make sure that my clients are adequately represented at whatever happens on the 6th.
Understood. And thank you.
And I'm not suggesting I would present, but I just want to have the opportunity to be there for that.
No, we understand your points well taken, and hopefully you will be able to, or a colleague will be able to attend on the 6th.
I just can't, you can't see me because I can't get my camera on, so I apologize for that.
That's quite all right. I think we're just working with some schedule.
Wagner hasn't said whether he.
Yeah, when you confirm with
No, I'm fine with March 6th. It's
Thanks,
fine.
Wadner.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are everybody's getting a little loopy now. So let's wrap this up. We will be continuing this until Thursday, March 6th at 7 p.m. Thanks to everyone, especially to staff for the late night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
To everybody. Thank you.
Bye.